Skáldskaparmál of the Prose Edda by Snorri Sturluson. Translated by Arthur Gilchrist Brodeur, 1888 to 1971. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine. The Poesy of Skalds. Section 1. A certain man was named Aegir or Hlær. He dwelt on the island which is now called Hlær's Isle, and was deeply versed in black magic. He took his way to Asgard, but the ^sir had foreknowledge of his journey. He was received with good cheer, and yet many things were done by deceit, with eye illusions. And at evening, when it was time for drinking, Odin had swords brought into the hall, so bright that light radiated from them, and other illumination was not used while they sat at drinking. Then the ^sir came in to their banquet, and in the high seats sat them down those 12 ^sir, who were appointed to be judges. These were their names: Thor, Njordr, Freyr, Tyr, Heimdallr, Bragi, Vidar, Vali, Ullr, Hcenir, Forseti, Loki. And in like manner the Asynjur: Frigg, Freyja, Gefjun, Idun, Gerdr, Sigyn, Fula, Nanna. It seemed glorious to Aegir to look about him in the hall. The wainscotings there were all hung with fair shields. There was also stinging mead, copiously quaffed. The man seated next to Aegir was Bragi, and they took part together in drinking and in converse. Bragi told Aegir of many things which had come to pass among the ^sir. He began the story at the point where 3 of the ^sir, Odin and Loki and Hcenir, departed from home and were wandering over mountains and wastes, and food was hard to find. But when they came down into a certain dale, they saw a herd of oxen, took one ox, and set about cooking it. Now when they thought that it must be cooked, they broke up the fire, and it was not cooked. After a while had passed, they having scattered the fire a second time, and it was not cooked, they took counsel together, asking each other what it might mean. Then they heard a voice speaking in the oak up above them, declaring that he who sat there confessed that he had caused the lack of virtue in the fire. They looked thither, and there sat an eagle, and it was no small one. Then the eagle said: "If ye are willing to give me my fill of the ox, then it will cook in the fire." They assented to this. Then he let himself float down from the tree, and alighted by the fire, and forthwith, at the very first, took unto himself the 2 hams of the ox and both shoulders. Then Loki was angered, snatched up a great pole, brandished it with all his strength, and drove it at the eagle's body. The eagle plunged violently at the blow, and flew up, so that the pole was fast to the eagle's back, and Loki's hands to the other end of the pole. The eagle flew at such a height that Loki's feet down below knocked against stones and rock heaps and trees, and he thought his arms would be torn from his shoulders. He cried aloud, entreating the eagle urgently for peace, but the eagle declared that Loki should never be loosed unless he would give him his oath to induce Idun to come out of Asgard with her apples. Loki assented, and being straightway loosed, went to his companions. Nor for that time are any more things reported concerning their journey until they had come home. But at the appointed time Loki lured Idun out of Asgard into a certain wood, saying that he had found such apples as would seem to her of great virtue, and prayed that she would have her apples with her, and compare them with these. Then Thjazi the giant came there in his eagle's plumage, and took Idun, and flew away with her, off into Thrymheimr to his abode. But the ^sir became straitened at the disappearance of Idun, and speedily they became hoary and old. Then those ^sir took counsel together, and each asked the other what had last been known of Idun, and the last that had been seen was that she had gone out of Asgard with Loki. Thereupon Loki was seized and brought to the Thing, and was threatened with death or tortures. When he had become well frightened, he declared that he would seek after Idun in Jotunheim if Freyja would lend him the hawk's plumage which she possessed. And when he got the hawk's plumage, he flew north into Jotunheim, and came on a certain day to the home of Thjazi the giant. Thjazi had rowed out to sea, but Idun was at home alone. Loki turned her into the shape of a nut, and grasped her in his claws and flew his utmost. Now when Thjazi came home and missed Idun, he took his eagle's plumage and flew after Loki, making a mighty rush of sound with his wings in his flight. But when the ^sir saw how the hawk flew with the nut, and where the eagle was flying, they went out below Asgard and bore burdens of plane shavings thither. As soon as the hawk flew into the citadel, he swooped down close by the castle wall; then the ^sir struck fire to the plane shavings. But the eagle could not stop himself when he missed the hawk; the feathers of the eagle caught fire, and straightway his flight ceased. Then the ^sir were near at hand, and slew Thjazi the giant within the gate of the ^sir, and that slaying is exceeding famous. Now Skadi, the daughter of the giant Thjazi, took helm and birnie and all weapons of war, and proceeded to Asgard to avenge her father. The ^sir, however, offered her reconciliation and atonement. The first article was that she should choose for herself a husband from among the ^sir, and choose by the feet only, seeing no more of him. Then she saw the feet of one man passing fair, and said: "I choose this one; in Baldr little can be loathly." But that was Njordr of Noatun. She had this article also in her bond of reconciliation, that the ^sir must do a thing she thought they would not be able to accomplish, to make her laugh. Then Loki did this: he tied a cord to the beard of a goat, the other end being about his own genitals, and each gave way in turn, and each of the two screeched loudly. Then Loki let himself fall onto Skadi's knee, and she laughed. Thereupon reconciliation was made with her on the part of the ^sir. It is so said that Odin did this by way of atonement to Skadi: he took Thjazi's eyes and cast them up into the heavens, and made of them 2 stars. Then said ^gir: "It seems to me that Thjazi was a mighty man. Now of what family was he?" Bragi answered: "His father was called Olvaldi; and if I tell thee of him, thou wilt think these things wonders. He was very rich in gold, but when he died and his sons came to divide the inheritance, they determined upon this measure for the gold which they divided: each should take as much as his mouth would hold, and all the same number of mouthfuls. One of them was Thjazi, the second Idi, the third Gangr. And we have it as a metaphor among us now, to call gold the mouth tale of these giants; but we conceal it in secret terms or in poesy in this way, that we call it speech, or word, or talk of these giants." Then said ^gir: "I deem that well concealed in secret terms." And again said ^gir: "Whence did this art, which ye call poesy, derive its beginnings?" Bragi answered: "These were the beginnings thereof. The gods had a dispute with the folk which are called Vanir, and they appointed a peace meeting between them, and established peace in this way: they each went to a vat and spat their spittle therein. Then at parting the gods took that peace token, and would not let it perish, but shaped thereof a man. This man is called Kvasir, and he was so wise that none could question him concerning anything but that he knew the solution. He went up and down the earth to give instruction to men, and when he came upon invitation to the abode of certain dwarves, Fjalar and Galar, they called him into privy converse with them, and killed him, letting his blood run into 2 vats and a kettle. The kettle is called Odrerir, and the vats Son and Bodn. They blended honey with the blood, and the outcome was that mead by the virtue of which he who drinks becomes a skald or scholar. The dwarves reported to the ^sir that Kvasir had choked on his own shrewdness, since there was none so wise there as to be able to question his wisdom. Then these dwarves invited the giant, who is called Gillingr, to visit them, and his wife with him. Next the dwarves invited Gillingr to row upon the sea with them. But when they had gone out from the land, the dwarves rowed into the breakers and capsized the boat. Gillingr was unable to swim, and he perished, but the dwarves righted their boat and rowed to land. They reported this accident to his wife, but she took it grievously and wept aloud. Then Fjalar asked her whether it would ease her heart if she should look out upon the sea at the spot where he had perished, and she desired it. Then he spoke softly to Galarr his brother, bidding him go up over the doorway, when she should go out, and let a millstone fall on her head, saying that her weeping grew wearisome to him, and even so he did. Now when the giant Suttungr, Gillingr's son, learned of this, he went over and took the dwarves and carried them out to sea, and set them on a reef which was covered at high tide. They besought Suttungr to give them respite of their lives, and as the price of reconciliation offered him the precious mead in satisfaction of his father's death. And that became a means of reconciliation between them. Suttungr carried the mead home, and concealed it in the place called Hnitbjorg, placing his daughter Gunnlod there to watch over it. Because of this we call poesy Kvasir's blood, or dwarves' drink, or fill, or any kind of liquid of Odrerir, or of Bodn, or of Son, or a ferry boat of dwarves, since this mead brought them life ransom from the reef, or Suttungr's mead, or liquor of Hnitbjorg. Then ^gir said: "These seem to me dark sayings, to call poesy by these names. But how did ye ^sir come at Suttungr's mead?" Bragi answered: "That tale runs thus. Odin departed from home, and came to a certain place where 9 thralls were mowing hay. He asked if they desired him to whet their scythes, and they assented. Then he took a hone from his belt and whetted the scythes. It seemed to them that the scythes cut better by far, and they asked that the hone be sold them. But he put such a value on it that whoso desired to buy must give a considerable price. None the less all said that they would agree, and prayed him to sell it to them. He cast the hone up into the air, but since all wished to lay their hands on it, they became so intermingled with one another that each struck with his scythe against the other's neck. Odin sought a night's lodging with the giant who was called Baugi, Suttungr's brother. Baugi bewailed his husbandry, saying that his 9 thralls had killed one another, and declared that he had no hope of workmen. Odin called himself Bolverkr in Baugi's presence. He offered to undertake 9 men's work for Baugi, and demanded for his wages 1 drink of Suttungr's mead. Baugi declared that he had no control whatever over the mead, and said that Suttungr was determined to have it to himself, but promised to go with Bolverkr and try if they might get the mead. During the summer Bolverkr accomplished 9 men's work for Baugi, but when winter came he asked Baugi for his hire. Then they both set out for Suttungr's. Baugi told Suttungr his brother of his bargain with Bolverkr, but Suttungr flatly refused them a single drop of the mead. Then Bolverkr made suggestion to Baugi that they try certain wiles, if perchance they might find means to get at the mead, and Baugi agreed readily. Thereupon Bolverkr drew out the auger called Rati, saying that Baugi must bore the rock if the auger cut. He did so. At last Baugi said that the rock was bored through, but Bolverkr blew into the auger hole, and the chips flew up at him. Then he discovered that Baugi would have deceived him, and he bade him bore through the rock. Baugi bored anew, and when Bolverkr blew a second time, then the chips were blown in by the blast. Then Bolverkr turned himself into a serpent and crawled into the auger hole. But Baugi thrust at him from behind with the auger and missed him. Bolverkr proceeded to the place where Gunnlod was, and lay with her 3 nights, and then she gave him leave to drink 3 draughts of the mead. In the first draught he drank every drop out of Odrerir, and in the second he emptied Bodn, and in the third Son, and then he had all the mead. Then he turned himself into the shape of an eagle, and flew as furiously as he could. But when Suttungr saw the eagle's flight, he too assumed the fashion of an eagle, and flew after him. When the ^sir saw Odin flying, straightway they set out their vats in the court, and when Odin came into Asgard, he spat up the mead into the vats. Nevertheless he came so near to being caught by Suttungr that he sent some mead backwards, and no heed was taken of this. Whosoever would might have that, and we call that the poetaster's part. But Odin gave the mead of Suttungr to the ^sir, and to those men who possess the ability to compose. Therefore we call poesy Odin's booty and find, and his drink and gift, and the drink of the ^sir. Then said ^gir: "In how many ways are the terms of skaldship variously phrased? Or how many are the essential elements of the skaldic art?" Then Bragi answered: "The elements into which all poesy is divided are 2. ^gir asked: "What 2?" Bragi said: "Metaphor and metre." What manner of metaphor is used for skaldic writing? Three are the types of skaldic metaphor. Which? Thus: first, calling everything by its name; the second type is that which is called substitution; the third type of metaphor is that which is called periphrasis, and this type is employed in such manner: suppose I take Odin or Thor or Tyr or any of the ^sir or elves, and to any of them whom I mention I add the name of a property of some other of the ^sir, or I record certain works of his. Thereupon he becomes owner of the name, and not the one whose name was applied to him; just as when we speak of Victory Tyr, or Tyr of the Hanged, or Tyr of Cargoes. That then becomes Odin's name, and we call these periphrastic names. So also with the title Tyr of the Wain. But now one thing must be said to young skalds, to such as yearn to attain to the craft of poesy, and to increase their store of figures with traditional metaphors; or to those who crave to acquire the faculty of discerning what is said in hidden phrase. Let such an one, then, interpret this book to his instruction and pleasure. Yet one is not so to forget or discredit these traditions as to remove from poesy those ancient metaphors with which it has pleased chief skalds to be content; nor, on the other hand, ought Christian men to believe in heathen gods, nor in the truth of these tales otherwise than precisely as one may find here in the beginning of the book. II. Now you may hear examples of the way in which chief skalds have held it becoming to compose, making use of these simple terms and periphrases, as when Arnor Earl's Skald says that Odin is called All Father: Now I'll tell men the virtue of the terrible Jarl, All Father's song surf streams; late my sorrows lightened. Here, moreover, he calls poesy the Song Surf of Allfather. Havardr the Halt sang thus: Now is the flight of eagles over the field; the sailors of the sea horses hie them to the Hanged God's gifts and feasting. Thus sang Vigaglumr: With the Hanged God's helmet the hosts have ceased from going by the brink; not pleasant the bravest held the venture. Thus sang Refr: Oft the Gracious One came to me at the holy cup of the Raven God; the king of the stem ploughed sea's gold from the skald in death is sundered. Thus sang Eyvindr Skald Despoiler: And Sigurdr, he who sated the ravens of Cargo God with the gore of the host of slain Haddings of life was spoiled by the earth rulers at Oglo. Thus sang Glumr Geirason: There the Tyr of Triumph himself inspired the terror of ships; the gods of breezes that favor good men steered them. Thus sang Eyvindr: Gundul and Skugul Gauta Tyr sent, to choose from kings, who, of Yngvi's kin, should go with Odin and be in Valhall. Thus sang Ulfr Uggason: Swiftly the far famed rideth, the foretelling god, to the fire speeds, to the wide pyre of his offspring; through my cheeks praise songs are pouring. Thus sang Thjodolfr of Hvin: The slain lay there sand strewing, spoil for the single eyed dweller in Frigg's bosom; in such deeds we rejoiced. Hallfredr sang thus: The doughty ship possessor with sharpened words and soothfast lures our land, the patient, barley locked wife of Thridi. Here is an example of this metaphor, that in poesy the earth is called the wife of Odin. Here is told what Eyvindr sang: Hermodr and Bragi spake Hropta Tyr: Go ye to greet the prince, for a king who seemeth a champion cometh to the hall hither. Thus sang Kormakr: The giver of lands, who bindeth the sail to the top, with gold lace honors him who pours God's verse mead; Odin wrought charms on Rindr. Thus sang Steinthor: Much have I to laud the ancient maid, though little, liquor of the valiant load of Gunnlod's arm clasp. Thus sang Ulfr Uggason: There I think the Valkyrs follow, and ravens, victorious Odin to the blood of holy Baldr; with old tales the hall was painted. Thus sang Egill Skallagrimsson: No victims for this to Vili's brother, the high god, I offer, glad to behold him. Yet has Mimir's friend on me bestowed amends of evil, which I account better. He has given me the art, he, the wolf's opposer, accustomed to battle, of blemish blameless. Here he is called High God, and Friend of Mimir, an adversary of the wolf. Thus sang Refr: Swift God of Slain, that wieldeth the snowy billows' wave hawks, the ships that drive the sea road, to thee we owe the dwarves' drink. Thus sang Einarr Tinkling Scale: 'Tis mine to pour the liquor of the Host God's mead cask freely, before the ship's swift speeder; for this I win no scorning. Thus sang Ulfr Uggason: His steed the lordly Heimdallr spurs to the pyre gods builded for the fallen son of Odin, the all wise Raven Ruler. This is said in Eiriksmal. What dream is that, quoth Odin? I thought to rise ere daybreak, to make Valhall ready for troops of slain. I roused the champions, bade them rise swiftly benches to strew, to wash beer flagons, the Valkyrs to pour wine, as a prince were coming. Kormakr sang this: I pray the precious ruler of Yngvi's people o'er me to hold his hand, bow shaking. Hroptr bore with him Gungnir. Thoralfr sang this: the mighty one of Hlidskjalf spoke his mind unto them, where the hosts of fearless Hrokkr were slaughtered. Thus sang Eyvindr: the mead which forth from Surtr's sunk dales the strong through spells swift flying bore. So sang Bragi: 'tis seen on my shield's surface how the son of the father of peoples craved to try his strength full swiftly 'gainst the rain beat snake earth circling. Thus sang Einarr: since less with Bestla's offspring prevail most lordly princes, then thou, my task is singing thy praise in songs of battle. Thus sang Thorvaldr Blending Skald: now have I much in the middle grasped of the son of Bor, of Buri's heir. III. Now you shall hear how the skalds have turned the art of poesy in these metaphorical phrases, which have been recorded before. For example, by calling it Kvasir's Gore and Ship of the Dwarves, Dwarves' Mead, Mead of the ^sir, Giant's Father Ransom, Liquor of Odrerir and of Bodn and of Son, and fullness of these, Liquor of Hnitbjorg, Booty and Find and Gift of Odin, even as has been sung in these verses, which Einarr Tinkling Scale wrought. I pray the high souled Warder of Earth to hear the ocean of the Cliff of Dwarves, my verses. Hear, Earl, the gore of Kvasir. And as Einir Tinkling Scale sang further, the dwarves' crag's song wave rushes o'er all the dauntless shield host of him who speeds the fury of the shield wall's piercing sword bane. Even as Ormr Steinthorsson sang: the body of the dame and my dead be borne into one hall; the drink of Dvalin, Franklin's here. And as Refr sang: I reveal the thought's drink of the rock folk to Thorstein; the billow of the dwarf crag plashes; I bid men hearken. Even as Egill sang: the prince requires my lore, and bound his praise to pour; Odin's mead I bore to English shore. And as Glumr Geirason sang: let the princely giver hearken; I hold the God king's liquor; let silence then be granted while we sing the loss of thanes. And as Eyvindr sang: a hearing I crave for the High One's liquor, while I utter Gillingr's atonement, while his kin in the kettle brewing of the Gallows Lord to the gods I trace. Even as Einar Tinkling Scale sang: the wave of Odin surges, of Odrerir's sea a billow 'gainst the tongue's song blade crashes; aye, our king's works are goodly. And as he sang further: now that which Bodn's billow bodes forth will straight be uttered; let the War King's host make silence in the hall, and hear the dwarves' ship. And as Eilifr Gudrunarsson sang: grant shall ye gifts of friendship, since grows of sun the seedling in our tongue's fertile sedge bank, true praise of our high lord. Even as Volu Steinn sang: Egill, hear the heart streams of Odin beat in cadence 'gainst my palate scary; the god's spoil to me is given. Thus sang Ormr Steinthorsson: No verse of mine men need to fear, no mockery I intertwine in Odin's spoil; my skill is sure in forging songs of praise. Thus sang Ulfr Uggason: I show to host glad Eilifir, the heart fjord's shoal of Odin, my song; him do I summon to hear the gift of Grimnir. Poesy is called Sea or Liquid of the Dwarves because Kvasir's blood was liquid in Odrerir before the mead was made, and then it was put into the kettle; wherefore it is called Odin's Kettle Liquor, even as Eyvindr sang and as we have recorded before: while his kin in the kettle brewing of the Gallows Lord to the gods I trace. Moreover, poesy is called Ship or Ale of the Dwarves. Ale is lid, and lid is a word for ships; therefore it is held that it is for this reason that poesy is now called Ship of the Dwarves, even as this verse tells: the wit of Gunnlod's liquor in swelling wind like fullness, and the everlasting dwarves' ship I own, to send the same road. IV. What figures should be employed to periphrase the name of Thor? Thus: one should call him Son of Odin and of Jord, Father of Magni and Modi and Thrudr, Husband of Sif, Stepfather of Ullr, Wielder and Possessor of Mjollnir and of the Girdle of Strength, and of Bilskirnir, Defender of Asgard and of Midgard, Adversary and Slayer of Giants and Troll Women, Smiter of Hrungnir, of Geirrodr and of Thrivaldi, Master of Thjalvi and Roskva, Foe of the Midgard Serpent, Foster father of Vingnir and Hlora. So sang Bragi the Skald. The line of Odin's offspring lay not slack on the gunwale, when the huge Ocean Serpent uncoiled on the sea's bottom. Thus sang Ulvir Cut Nose and Crop Ears: the Encircler of all regions and Jord's son sought each other. Thus sang Eilifr: wroth stood Roskva's brother, and Magni's sire wrought bravely; with terror Thor's staunch heart stone trembled not, nor Thjalfi's. And thus sang Eysteinn Valdason: with glowing eyes Thrudir's father glared at the sea road circler, ere the fish's watery dwelling flowed in, the boat confounding. Eysteinn sang further: swiftly Sif's husband bound him to haste forth with the giants for his hardy fishing; well sing we Hrimnir's Horn Stream. Again he sang: the earth fish tugged so fiercely that Ullr's kinsmen's clenched fists were pulled out past the gunwale, the broad planks rent asunder. Thus sang Bragi: the strong fiend's Terrifier in his right hand swung his hammer, when he saw the loathly sea fish that all the lands confineth. Thus sang Gamli: while the lord of high Bilskirnir, whose heart no falsehood fashioned, swiftly strove to shatter the sea fish with his hammer. Thus sang Thorbiorn Lady's Skald: bravely Thor fought for Asgard and the followers of Odin. Thus sang Bragi: and the vast misshapen circler of the ship's sea path, fierce minded, stared from below in anger at the Skull Splitter of Hrungnir. Again sang Bragi: well hast thou, Hewer in sunder of the 9 heads of Thrivaldi, kept thy goats. Thus sang Eilifr: the merciless destroyer of the people of the giants grasped with ready forearms at the heavy red hot iron. Thus sang Ulfr Uggason: faintly the stout framed Thickling a fearful peril called it, at the great draught wondrous heavy, drawn up by the Lord of He Goats. Thus Ulfr sang further: the very mighty Slayer of the Mountain Man brought crashing his fist on Hymir's temple; that was a hurt full deadly. Yet again sang Ulfr: Vimur's ford's wide grappler against the waves smote featly the glittering serpent's head off; with old tales the hall was gleaming. Here he is called Giant of Vimer's Ford. There is a river called Vimer, which Thor waded when he journeyed to the garth of Geirrodr. Thus sang Vetrlidi the skald: Thou didst break the leg of Leikn, didst cause to stoop Starkadr, didst bruise Thrivaldi. Thus sang Thorbjorn's Lady Skald: Thou didst smite the head of Keila, smash Kjalandi altogether, ere thou slewest Lutr and Leidi, didst spill the blood of Busera, didst hold back Hengjankjapta. Hyrrokin died before; yet sooner in like fashion Svivur from life was taken. (5) How should one periphrase Baldr? By calling him Son of Odin and Frigg, Husband of Nanna, Father of Forseti, Possessor of Hringhorni and Draupnir, Adversary of Hodr, Companion of Hel, God of Tears. Ulfr Uggason, following the story of Baldr, has composed a long passage in the Husdrapa, and examples are recorded earlier to the effect that Baldr is so termed. VI. How should one periphrase Njordr? By calling him God of the Vanir, or Kinsman of the Vanir, or Wain, Father of Freyr and Freyja, God of Wealth Bestowal. So says Thordr Sjareksson: Gudrun's self by ill her sons did kill; the wise God bride at the Wain's side grieved. Men tell Odin tamed steeds well; 'twas not the saying Hamdir spared sword playing. Here it is recorded that Skadi departed from Njordr, as has already been written. VII. How should one periphrase Freyr? Thus: by calling him Son of Njordr, Brother of Freyja, and also God of Vanir, and Kinsman of the Vanir, and Wain, and God of the fertile season, and God of wealth gifts. Thus sang Egill Skallagrimsson: For that Grotbjorn in goods and gear Freyr and Njordr have fairly blessed. Freyr is called Adversary of Beli, even as Eyvindr Spoiler of Skalds sang: When the Earl's foe wished to inhabit the outer bounds of Beli's hater. He is the possessor of Skidbladnir, and of that boar which is called Gold Bristle, even as it is told here. Ivaldi's offspring in ancient days went to shape Skidbladnir, foremost of ships; fairly for Freyr, choicely for Njordr's child. Thus speaks Ulfr Uggason: The battle bold Freyr rideth first on the golden bristled barrow boar to the bale fire of Baldr, and leads the people. The boar is also called Fearful Tusk. VIII. How should one periphrase Heimdallr? By calling him Son of Nine Mothers, or Watchman of the Gods, as already has been written, or White God, Foe of Loki, Seeker of Freyja's necklace. A sword is called Heimdallr's Head, for it is said that he was pierced by a man's head. The tale thereof is told in Heimdallr Galdr, and ever since a head is called Heimdallr's Measure; a sword is called Man's Measure. Heimdallr is the possessor of Gulltoppr; he is also frequenter of Vagaskr and Singasteinn, where he contended with Loki for the necklace Brisingamen. He is also called Vindler. Ulfr Uggason composed a long passage in the Husdrapa on that legend, and there it is written that they were in the form of seals. Heimdallr also is son of Odin. IX. How should one periphrase Tyr? By calling him the One-handed God, and Fosterer of the Wolf, God of Battles, son of Odin. X. How should one periphrase Bragi? By calling him Husband of Idun, First Maker of Poetry, and the Long-bearded God. After his name, a man who has a great beard is called Beard Bragi, and son of Odin. XI. How should one periphrase Vidar? He may be called the Silent God, Possessor of the Iron Shoe, Foe and Slayer of Fenris Wolf, Avenger of the Gods, Divine Dweller in the homesteads of the Fathers, Son of Odin, and Brother of the ^sir. XII. How should Vali be periphrased? Thus: by calling him Son of Odr and Rindr, Stepson of Frigg, Brother of the ^sir, Baldr's Avenger, Foe and Slayer of Hodr, Dweller in the homesteads of the Fathers. XIII. How should one periphrase Hodr? Thus by calling him the Blind God, Baldr's Slayer, Thrower of the Mistletoe, Son of Odin, Companion of Hel, Foe of Vali. XIV. How should Ullr be periphrased? By calling him Son of Sif, Stepson of Thor, God of the Snowshoe, God of the Bow, Hunting God, God of the Shield. XV. How should Honir be periphrased? By calling him Benchmate or Companion or Friend of Odin, the Swift of God, the Long Footed, and King of Clay. XVI. How should one periphrase Loki? Thus: call him Son of Farbauti and Laufey, or of Nall, brother of Bielistr and of Helblindi, father of the monster of Van, that is, Fenris Wolf, and of the vast monster, that is, the Midgard Serpent, and of Hel, and Nari, and Ali, kinsman and uncle, evil companion and benchmate of Odin and the ^sir, visitor and chest trapping of Geirrodr, thief of the giants, of the goat, of Brisingamen, and of Idun's apples, kinsman of Sleipnir, husband of Sigyn, foe of the gods, harmer of Sif's hair, forger of evil, the sly god, slanderer and cheat of the gods, contriver of Baldr's death, the bound god, wrangling foe of Heimdallr and of Skadi. Even as Ulfr Uggason sings here: the famed Rainbow's Defender, ready in wisdom, striveth at Singasteinn with Loki, Farbauti's sin sly offspring. The son of mothers 8 and 1, mighty in wrath, possesses the stone ere Loki cometh. I make known songs of praise. Here it is written that Heimdallr is the son of 9 mothers. XVII. Now an account shall be given of the source of those metaphors which have but now been recorded, and of which no accounts were rendered before; even such as Bragi gave to ^gir, telling how Thor had gone into the east to slay trolls, and Odin rode Sleipnir into Jotunheim and visited that giant who was named Hrungnir. Hrungnir asked what manner of man he with the golden helm might be, who rode through air and water, and said that the stranger had a wondrous good steed. Odin said he would wager his head there was no horse in Jotunheim that would prove equally good. Hrungnir answered that it was a good horse, but declared that he had a much better paced horse which was called Gold Mane. Hrungnir had become angry, and vaulted up onto his horse and galloped after him, thinking to pay him for his boasting. Odin galloped so furiously that he was on the top of the next hill first; but Hrungnir was so filled with the giant's frenzy that he took no heed until he had come in beyond the gates of Asgard. When he came to the hall door the ^sir invited him to drink. He went within, and ordered drink to be brought to him, and then those flagons were brought in from which Thor was wont to drink, and Hrungnir swilled from each in turn. But when he had become drunken, then big words were not wanting. He boasted that he would lift up Valhall and carry it to Jotunheim, and sink Asgard and kill all the gods, save that he would take Freyja and Sif home with him. Freyja alone dared pour for him, and he vowed that he would drink all the ale of the ^sir. But when his overbearing insolence became tiresome to the ^sir, they called on the name of Thor. Straightway Thor came into the hall, brandishing his hammer, and he was very wroth, and asked who had advised that these dogs of giants be permitted to drink there, or who had granted Hrungnir safe conduct to be in Valhall, or why Freyja should pour for him as at a feast of the ^sir. Then Hrungnir answered, looking at Thor with no friendly eyes, and said that Odin had invited him to drink, and he was under his safe conduct. Thor declared that Hrungnir should repent of that invitation before he got away. Hrungnir answered that Asa Thor would have scant renown for killing him, weaponless as he was. It were a greater trial of his courage if he dared fight with Hrungnir on the border at Grjotunagard. And it was a great folly, said he, when I left my shield and hone behind at home. If I had my weapons here, then we should try single combat. But as matters stand, I declare thee a coward if thou wilt slay me, a weaponless man. Thor was by no means anxious to avoid the fight when challenged to the field, for no one had ever offered him single combat before. Then Hrungnir went his way and galloped furiously until he came to Jotunheim. the news of his journey was spread abroad among the giants, and it became noised abroad that a meeting had been arranged between him and Thor. The giants deemed that they had much at stake, who should win the victory, since they looked for ill at Thor's hands if Hrungnir perished, he being strongest of them all. Then the giants made a man of clay at Grjotunagard. He was 9 miles high and 3 broad under the armpits, but they could get no heart big enough to fit him, until they took one from a mare. Even that was not steadfast within him when Thor came. Hrungnir had the heart which is notorious, of hard stone and spiked with 3 corners, even as the written character is since formed, which men call Hrungnir's heart. His head also was of stone; his shield too was stone, wide and thick, and he had the shield before him when he stood at Grjotunagard and waited for Thor. Moreover he had a hone for a weapon, and brandished it over his shoulders, and he was not a pretty sight. At one side of him stood the clay giant, which was called Mukurkalfi. He was sore afraid, and it is said that he wet himself when he saw Thor. Thor went to the meeting place, and Thjalfi with him. Then Thjalfi ran forward to the spot where Hrungnir stood, and said to him: "Thou standest unwarily, giant, having the shield before thee; for Thor has seen thee, and comes hither down below the earth, and will come at thee from beneath." Then Hrungnir thrust the shield under his feet, and stood upon it, wielding the hone with both hands. Then speedily he saw lightnings, and heard great claps of thunder. Then he saw Thor in godlike anger, who came forward furiously, and swung the hammer, and cast it at Hrungnir from afar off. Hrungnir lifted up the hone in both hands, and cast it against him. It struck the hammer in flight, and the hone burst in sunder. One part fell to the earth, and thence are come all the flint rocks; the other burst on Thor's head, so that he fell forward to the earth. But the hammer Mjollnir struck Hrungnir in the middle of the head, and smashed his skull into small crumbs, and he fell forward upon Thor, so that his foot lay over Thor's neck. Thjalfi struck at Mukarkalfi, and he fell with little glory. Thereupon Thjalfi went over to Thor, and would have lifted Hrungnir's foot off him, but could not find sufficient strength. Straightway all the ^sir came up, when they learned that Thor was fallen, and would have lifted the foot from off him, and could do nothing. Then Magni came up, son of Thor and Jarnsaxa. He was then 3 nights old. He cast the foot of Hrungnir off Thor, and spake: "See how ill it is, father, that I came so late. I had struck this giant dead with my fist, methinks, if I had met with him." Thor arose and welcomed his son, saying that he should surely become great. "And I will give thee," he said, "the horse Goldmane, which Hrungnir possessed." Then Odin spake, and said that Thor did wrong to give the good horse to the son of a giantess, and not to his father. Thor went home to Thrudvangar, and the hone remained sticking in his head. Then came the wise woman who was called Groa, wife of Aurvandill the Valiant. She sang her spells over Thor until the hone was loosened. But when Thor knew that, and thought that there was hope that the hone might be removed, he desired to reward Groa for her leechcraft and make her glad, and told her these things: that he had waded from the north over Icy Stream, and had borne Aurvandill in a basket on his back from the north out of Jotunheim. And he added for a token that one of Aurvandill's toes had stuck out of the basket, and became frozen; wherefore Thor broke it off and cast it up into the heavens, and made thereof the star called Aurvandill's Toe. Thor said that it would not be long ere Aurvandill came home, but Groa was so rejoiced that she forgot her incantations, and the hone was not loosened, and stands yet in Thor's head. Therefore it is forbidden to cast a hone across the floor, for then the hone is stirred in Thor's head. Thjodolfr of Hvin has made a song after this tale in the Hauslung. It says there: On the high and painted surface of the hollow shield still further one may see how the giant's terror sought the home of Gjotunn. The angry son of Jord drove to the play of steel; below him thundered the Moon Way; rage swelled in the heart of Meili's brother. All the bright gods' high mansions burned before Ullr's kinsman. With hail the earth was beaten along his course when the he goats drew the god of the smooth wain forward to meet the grisly giant. The earth, the spouse of Odin, straightway reft asunder. No truce made Baldr's brother With the bitter foe of earth folk. Rocks shook, and crags were shivered; The shining upper heaven burned; I saw the giant of the boat sailed sea reef Waver and give way fast before him, Seeing his warlike slayer. Swiftly the shining shield rim Shot 'neath the cliff ward's shoe soles; That was the wise god's mandate, The war Valkyries willed it. The champion of the Waste Land Not long thereafter waited For the speedy blow delivered By the friend of the Snout Troll's crusher. He who of breath despoileth Beli's baleful hirelings Felled on the shield rim circled The fiend of the roaring mountain. The monster of the glen field Before the mighty hammer Sank, when the Hill Dane's breaker Struck down the hideous caitiff. Then the hone hard broken, Hurled by the Ogress lover, Whirred into the brain ridge Of Earth's Son, that the whetter Of steels, sticking unloosened In the skull of Odin's offspring, Stood there all besprinkled With Einridi's blood. Until the wise Ale Goddess With wondrous lays Enchanted the vaunted woe, rust ruddy, From the Wain God's sloping temples; Painted on its circuit I see them clearly pictured, The fair bossed shield, with stories figured, I had from Thorleifr. XVIII. Then said Mgir: "Methinks Hrungnir was of great might. Did Thor accomplish yet more valorous deeds when he had to do with the trolls?" And Bragi answered: "It is worthy to be told at length how Thor went to Geirrodr's dwelling. At that time he had not the hammer Mjollnir with him, nor his girdle of might, nor the iron gauntlets; and that was the fault of Loki, who went with him. For once, flying in his sport with Frigg's hawk plumage, it had happened to Loki to fly for curiosity's sake into Geirrodr's court. There he saw a great hall, and alighted and looked in through the window. And Geirrodr looked up and saw him, and commanded that the bird be taken and brought to him. But he who was sent could scarce get to the top of the wall, so high was it. And it seemed pleasant to Loki to see the man striving with toil and pains to reach him; and he thought it was not yet time to fly away until the other had accomplished the perilous climb. When the man pressed hard after him, then he stretched his wings for flight, and thrust out vehemently, but now his feet were stuck fast. So Loki was taken and brought before Geirrodr the giant. But when Geirrodr saw his eyes, he suspected that this might be a man, and bade him answer; but Loki was silent. Then Geirrodr shut Loki into a chest, and starved him there 3 months. And now when Geirrodr took him out and commanded him to speak, Loki told who he was; and by way of ransom for his life he swore to Geirrodr with oaths that he would get Thor to come to Geirrodr's dwelling in such a fashion that he should have neither hammer nor girdle of might with him. Thor came to spend the night with that giantess who is called Gridr, mother of Vidar the Silent. She told Thor the truth concerning Geirrodr, that he was a crafty giant and ill to deal with; and she lent him the girdle of might and iron gloves which she possessed, and her staff also, which is called Gridr's Rod. Then Thor proceeded to the river named Vimur, greatest of all rivers. There he girded himself with the girdle of might, and braced firmly downstream with Gridr's Rod, and Loki held on behind by the girdle of might. When Thor came to mid current, the river waxed so greatly that it broke high upon his shoulders. Then Thor sang this: Wax thou not now, Vimur, for I fain would wade thee into the Giants' Garth. Know thou, if thou waxest, then waxeth God's strength in me as high up as the heavens. Then Thor saw Gjalp, daughter of Geirrodr, standing in certain ravines, one leg in each, spanning the river; and she was causing the spate. Then Thor snatched up a great stone out of the river, and cast it at her, saying these words: At its source should a river be stemmed. Nor did he miss that at which he threw. In that moment he came to the shore, and took hold of a rowan clump, and so climbed out of the river; whence comes the saying that Rowan is Thor's deliverance. Now when Thor came before Geirrodr, the companions were shown first into the goat fold for their entertainment, and there was one chair there for a seat, and Thor sat there. Then he became aware that the chair moved under him up toward the roof. He thrust Gridr's rod up against the rafters, and pushed back hard against the chair. Then there was a great crash, and screaming followed. Under the chair had been Geirrodr's daughters, Gjalp and Greip, and he had broken both their backs. Then Geirrodr had Thor called into the hall to play games. There were great fires the whole length of the hall. When Thor came up over against Geirrodr, then Geirrodr took up a glowing bar of iron with the tongs and cast it at Thor. Thor caught it with his iron gloves and raised the bar in the air, but Geirrodr leapt behind an iron pillar to save himself. Thor lifted up the bar and threw it, and it passed through the pillar and through Geirrodr and through the wall, and so on out even into the earth. Eilifr Gudrunarson has wrought verses on this story in Thor's Drapa. The winding sea snake's father did wile from home the slayer Of the life of the gods' grim foemen; ever was Loptr a liar. The never faithful searcher of the heart of the fearless Thunderer declared green ways were lying to the walled stead of Geirrodr. No long space Thor let Loki lure him to the going. They yearned to overmaster Thorn's offspring, when the seeker of Idi's garth, then giants greater in might, made ready in ancient days for faring to the giants' seat from Odin's. Further in the faring forward went warlike Thjalfi, with the divine host cheerer, than the deceiving lover of her of enchanted singing. I chant the ale of Odin. The hill dame's mocker measured the moor with hollow foot soles, and the war wonted journeyed, till the hill women's waster came to Gangr's blood the Vimur. Then Loki's bale repeller, eager in anger, lavish of valor, longed to struggle against the maid, kinswoman of the sedge cowled giant. And the honor lessener of the Lady of the Sea Crag won foothold in the surging of the hail rolled leaping hill spate. The rock knave's swift pursuer passed the broad stream of his staff's road, where the foam flecked mighty rivers frothed with raging venom. There they set the staves before them in the streaming grove of dogfish. The Windwood's slippery pebbles, smitten to speech, slept not. The clashing rod did rattle 'gainst the worn rocks, and the rapid of the fells howled, storm smitten, on the river's stony anvil. The Weaver of the Girdle beheld the washing slope stream fall on his hard grown shoulders. No help he found to save him. The Minisher of Hill Folk caused might to grow within him, even to the roof of heaven, till the rushing flood should ebb. The fair warriors of the ^sir, in battle wise, fast waded, and the surging pool, sword sweeping, streamed. The earth drifts billow, blown by the mighty tempest, tugged with monstrous fury at the terrible oppressor of the earth born tribe of cave folk, till Thjalfi came uplifted on his lord Thor's wide shield strap. That was a mighty thew test for the prop of heaven. The maidens of the harmful giant stiffly held the stream stubborn against them. The giantess destroyer with Gridr's staff fared sternly. Nor did their hearts of rancor droop in the men unblemished, nor courage 'gainst the headlong fall of the current fail them. A fiercer daring spirit flamed in the dauntless god's breast. With terror Thor's staunch heartstone trembled not, nor Thjalfi's. And afterward the haters of the host of sword companions, the shatterers of bucklers, dinned on the shield of giants, ere the destroying peoples of the shingle drift of monsters wrought the helm play of Hedinn 'gainst the rock dwelling marksmen. The hostile folk of sea heights fled before the oppressor of headland tribes. The dalesmen of the hill tops, imperilled, fled when Odin's kindred stood, enduring staunchly. The Danes of the flood reef's border bowed down to the Flame Shaker. Where the chiefs, with thoughts of valor imbued, marched into Thorn's house, a mighty crash resounded of the cave's ring wall. The slayer of the mountain reindeer people, on the giant maiden's wide hood, was brought in bitter peril. There was baleful peace talk. And they pressed the high head. bearing the piercing brow moon's eye flame against the hill hall's rafters. On the high roof tree broken he crushed those raging women. The swinging storm car's guider burst the stout ancient back ridge and breastbones of both women. Earth's son became familiar with knowledge strange. The cave men of the land of stone o'ercame not, nor long with ale were merry. The frightful elm string's plucker, the friend of Sudri, hurtled the hot bar in the forge fused into the hand of Odin's Gladdener. So that Gunnr's swift speeder seized the friend of Feia with quick hand gulps, the molten high raised draught of metal, when the firebrand glowing flew with maddened fury from the giant's gripping fingers to the grim sire of Trudr. The hall of the doughty trembled when he dashed the massy forehead of the hill wight 'gainst the bottom of the house wall's ancient column. Ullr's glorious stepsire with the glowing bar of mischief struck with his whole strength downward at the hill knave's mid girdle. The god with gory hammer crushed utterly Glaumr's lineage. The hunter of the kindred of the Hearth Dame was victorious. The plucker of the bowstring lacked not his people's valor. The chariot god who swiftly wrought grief to the giants' bench thanes. He to whom hosts make offering hewed down the dolt like dwellers of the cloud abyss of Elf home, crushing them with the fragment of Gridr's rod. The litter of hawks, the race of Listi, could not harm the help strong queller of Ella's stone folk. 19. How should one periphrase Frigg, call her daughter of Fjorgyn, wife of Odin, mother of Baldr, co-wife of Jord and Rindr and Gunnlod and Gridr, mother-in-law of Nanna, lady of the Aesir and Asynjur, mistress of Fulla and of the Hawk Plumage and of Fensalir? 20. How should one periphrase Freyja? Thus: by calling her daughter of Fjordr, sister of Freyr, wife of Odir, mother of Hnoss, possessor of the slain, of Sessrumnir, of the Gib cats, and of Brisinga men, goddess of the Vanir, lady of the Vanir, goddess beautiful in tears, goddess of love. All the goddesses may be periphrased thus: by calling them by the name of another, and naming them in terms of their possessions, or their works, or their kindred. 21. How should Sif be periphrased? By calling her wife of Thor, mother of Ullr, fair haired goddess, co-wife of Jarnsaxa, mother of Trudir. 22. How should Idunn be periphrased? Thus: by calling her wife of Bragi and keeper of the apples, and the apples should be called Age Elixir of the ^sir. Idunn is also called Spoil of the giant Thjazi, according to the tale that has been told before, how he took her away from the ^sir. Thjodolfr of Hvin composed verses after that tale in the Hauslung. How shall I make voice payment meetly for the shield bridge of the war wall Thorleifr gave me? I survey the truceless faring of the three gods' strife foremost, and Thjatsi's on the shining cheek of the shield of battle. The spoiler of the lady swiftly flew with tumult to meet the high god rulers, long hence in eagle plumage. The erne in old days lighted where the ^sir meat were bearing to the fire pit. The giant of the rocks was called No Faint Heart; the skilful god deceiver to the gods proved a stern sharer of bones. The high instructor of ^sir, helmet hooded, saw some power check the seething. The sea mew, very crafty, spake from the ancient tree trunk. Loki was ill willed toward him. The wolfish monster ordered Meili's sire to deal him food from the holy trencher. The friend of him of ravens to blow the fire was chosen. The giant king, flesh greedy, sank down where the guileless craft sparing gods were gathered. The comely lord of all things commanded Loki swiftly to part the bull's meat, slaughtered by Skadi's ringing bowstring, among the folk. But straightway the cunning food defiler of the ^sir filched the quarters, all four, from the broad table. And the hungry sire of giants savagely ate the yoke beast from the oak tree's sheltering branches. That was in ancient ages, ere the wise minded Loki, warder of war spoil, smote him, boldest of foes of earth folk, with a pole betwixt the shoulders. The arm burden then of Sigyn, whom all the gods in bonds see, firmly forthwith was fastened to the fosterer of Skadi. To Jotunheim's strong dweller the pole stuck, and the fingers of Loki too, companion of Honir, clung to the pole's end. The bird of blood flew upward, blithesome in his quarry. A long way off with Loki, the lither god, that almost, Wolf's sire, was rent asunder. Thor's friend must sue for mercy, such peace as he might purchase to pray. Nigh slain was Loptr. Then Hymir's kinsman ordered the crafty god, pain maddened, to wile to him the maiden who warded the ^sir's age cure. Ere long the necklace robber, Brisinga's thief, lured slyly the dame of Brunakr's brooklet into the Base One's dwelling. At that the steep slope dwellers no sorrow felt. Then Idunn was from the south, by giants new stolen, come among them. All Yngvi Freyr's high kindred, hoary and old, to council hasted. Gruesome of fashion and ugly all the gods were. This heard I, that the staunch friend of Hcenir, oft thereafter with wiles he tricked the ^sir, flew in hawk wings hidden. And the vile sire of giants, vigorous wing plume wielder, hurtled on eagle pinion after the hawk shaped Loki. Swiftly the gods have kindled a fire, and the sovereign rulers sustained the flame with shavings. Scorched was the flying giant; he plunged down in mid soaring. 'Tis pictured on the giant's soul bridge, the shield which, painted with stories, Thorleifr gave me. This is the correct manner of periphrasing the ^sir: to call each of them by the name of another, and to designate him in terms of his works, or his possessions, or his kindred.
XXIII. How should the heaven be periphrased? Thus: call it Skull of Ymir, and hence Giant's Skull, Task or burden of the dwarves, or helm of Vestri and Austri, Sudri or Nordri, Land of the Sun, of the Moon, and of the stars of heaven, of the wains and the winds, Helm or house of the air and the earth and the sun. So sang Arnorr Earl's Skald. So large of gifts ne'er mounted, young lord of shields on ship deck, 'neath the ancient skull of Ymir, splendid this prince's largess. And as he sang again: Bright grows the sun at dusking, the earth sinks into the dark sea, the toil of Austri bursteth, all the ocean on the fells breaks. Thus sang Bodvar the Halt: For never 'neath the sun's plain shall come a nobler landward, keener in battle onset, nor a brother of Ingi better. And as Thjodolfr of Hvin sang: Hjord's son drove to the steel play, high swelled the godlike anger in the mind of Meili's brother, and the moon way 'neath him quivered. Even as sang Ormr Barrey's Skald: Lady of Draupnir's gore streak, however great I know him, the wielder by right he ruleth, of the Wain's road sees me gladly. Even as the skald Bragi sang: He who threw the dead eyes of Thjazi, Skadi's father, into the wind's wide basin, o'er the abodes of menfolk many. And as Markus sang: 'Tis long since the dear loved warder of seamen was born on the wave-girt earth bottom of the storm container. Each man praises the sublime age of the ring dispenser. Even as Stein Herdisarsson sang: I sing the holy ruler of the high world tent rather than men, for very precious is he, his praises tell I. And as Arnorr Earl's Skald sang: Help, dear King of Heaven, the day's plain, help my Hermundr. And as Arnorr sang further: Soothfast King of the sun tents, help stout-hearted Ragnvaldr. And as Hallvardr sang: Knutr wards the land as the ruler of all wards the radiant Fell Hall. As Arnor sang: Michael, wise of understanding, weighs what seems done ill and good things. Then the monarch of the Sun's helm at the doom seat parts all mortals. 24. How should one periphrase the earth? Thus: by calling her Flesh of Ymir, and Mother of Thor, daughter of Onar, Odin's bride, co-wife of Frigg and Rindr and Gunnlod, mother-in-law of Sif, floor and bottom of the storm hall, sea of beasts, daughter of night, sister of Audr and of day. Even as Eyvindr Skald Despoiler sang: Now the beaming gold is hidden in the body of the mother of the giant's foe. The counsels of a kindred strong are mighty. As sang Hallfredr Troublous Skald: In council 'twas determined that the king's friend, wise in counsel, should wed the land, sole daughter of Onar, greenly wooded. And he said further: The Raven Abode's brave ruler got the broad-faced bride of Odin, the land, with kingly counsels of weapons, lured unto him. Even as Thjodolfr sang: The ruler glad in warriors in the rowed hull doth fasten the ships of men to the strand's end, at the head of the sea keel ridden. As Hallfredr sang: Full loath to let the land slip I hold the lordly spear prince. Audr's sister is subjected to the splendid treasure spender. Thus sang Thjodolfr: Far off when the dart-slow sluggard stood, when the sword inciter in ancient days took to him the unripe co-wife of Rindr. 25. How should one periphrase the sea? Thus: by calling it Ymir's blood, visitor of the gods, husband of Ran, father of Aegir's daughters, of them who are called Himingleiva, Dufa, Blodughada, Hefring, Udr, Hrun, Bylgja, Bara, Kolga, land of Ran and of Aegir's daughters, of ships and of ships' names, of the keel, of beaks, of planks and seams, of fishes, of ice, way and road of sea kings, likewise encircler of islands, house of sands and of kelp and of reefs, land of fishing gear, of sea fowls and of fair wind. Even as Ormr Barry's Skald sang: On the gravelly beach of good ships grates the blood of Ymir. As Refr sang: The mild deer of the masthead beareth o'er the murky water from the westward her wave-pressed bows, the land I look for before the beak, the whale-home shallows. Even as Steinn sang: When the fallow fell wall's whirlwinds wove o'er the waves full fiercely, and Aegir's storm-glad daughters tore, of Grimfrost begotten. And as Refr sang: Gymir's wet-cold spae-wife wiles the bear of twisted cables oft into Aegir's wide jaws, where the angry billow breaketh. It is said here that Aegir and Gymir are both the same, and he sang further: And the sea-peak Sleipnir slitteth, the stormy breast rain-driven, the wave, with red stain running out of white Ran's mouth. As Einar Skulason sang: The stern snow-wind has thrust out with strength the ship from landward, the Swanland steed sees Iceland into the surf receding. And as he sang further: Many a stiff rowlock straineth, and the noisy strand of fish gear the sea, the lands o'ercometh, men's hands oft span the stays. And he sang yet further: The grey Isle-fetter urges Haiti's raven ship onward, gold beaks the fleet ships carry, rich that faring to the chieftain. And he sang again: The isle-rim, autumn chilly, impels the dock's cold snowshoe. And thus also: The cool land's surging girdle before the beak springs asunder. As Snaebjorn sang: They say 9 brides of skerries swiftly move the sea churn of Groti's island flower bin beyond the earth's last outskirt, they who long the corny ale ground of Amlodi, the giver of rings, now cuts with ship's beak the abiding place of boat sides. Here the sea is called Amlodi's churn, as Einar Skulason sang: the sturdy drive nails weaken in the swift swirl, where paleth Rockney's heaving plain, wind puffs the reefs against the stays. Section 26. How should one periphrase the sun? By calling her daughter of Mundilfari, sister of the moon, wife of Glenr, fire of heaven and of the air. Even as Skuli Thorsteinsson sang: Glenr's god-blithe bedmate wadeth into the goddess's mansion with rays, then the good light cometh of grey Sark Mani downward. Thus sang Einar Skulason: where so the lofty flickering flame of the world's hall swimmeth o'er our loved friend, who hateth and lavisheth the sea gold. Section 27. How should the wind be periphrased? Thus: call it son of Fornjotr, brother of the sea and of fire, scathe or ruin or hound or wolf of the wood, or of the sail or of the rigging. Thus spake Svein in the Nordersetu Drapa. First began to fly Fornjotr's sons ill-shapen. Section 28. How should one periphrase fire? Thus: call it brother of the wind and the sea, ruin and destruction of wood and of houses, Halfr's bane, son of houses. Section 29. How should winter be periphrased? Thus: call it son of Vindsvalr, destruction of serpents, tempest season. Thus sang Ormr Steinthorsson: to the blind man I proffer this blessing, Vindsvalr's son. Thus sang Asgrimr: the warlike spoil bestower, lavish of wealth that winter, snake's woe, in Trondheim tarried, though folk knew thy true actions. Section 30. How should one periphrase summer? Thus: call it son of Svasudr, and comfort of serpents, and growth of men. Even as Egil Skallagrimsson sang: we shall wave our swords, O dyer of wolf's teeth, make them glitter, a deed we have for wreaking in the comfort of dale serpents. Section 31. How should man be periphrased? By his works, by that which he gives or receives or does. He may also be periphrased in terms of his property, those things which he possesses, and, if he be liberal, of his liberality. Likewise in terms of the families from which he is descended, as well as of those which have sprung from him. How is one to periphrase him in terms of these things? Thus: by calling him accomplisher or performer of his goings or his conduct, of his battles or sea voyages or huntings or weapons or ships. And because he is a tester of weapons and a winner of battles, the words for winner and wood being the same, as are also those for tester and rowan, therefore from these phrases skalds have called man ash or maple, grove, or other masculine tree names, and periphrased him in such expressions in terms of battles or ships or possessions. It is also correct to periphrase man with all the names of the Aesir, also with giant terms, and this last is for the most part for mocking or libelous purposes. Periphrasis with the names of elves is held to be favorable. Woman should be periphrased with reference to all female garments, gold and jewels, ale or wine or any other drink, or to that which she dispenses or gives. Likewise with reference to ale vessels, and to all those things which it becomes her to perform or to give. It is correct to periphrase her thus, by calling her giver or user of that of which she partakes. But the words for giver and user are also names of trees. Therefore woman is called in metaphorical speech by all feminine tree names. Woman is periphrased with reference to jewels or agates for this reason. In heathen times, what was called a stone necklace, which they wore about the neck, was a part of a woman's apparel. Now it is used figuratively in such a way as to periphrase woman with stones and all names of stones. Woman is also metaphorically called by the names of Asinir, or the Valkyrs, or Norns, or women of supernatural kind. It is also correct to periphrase woman in terms of all her conduct or property or family. 32. How should gold be periphrased? Thus: by calling it Aegir's fire, and needles of Glasir, hair of Sif, snood of Fulla, Freyja's tears, talk and voice and word of giants, Draupnir's drop and rain or shower of Draupnir, or of Freyja's eyes, Otter's ransom, forced payment of the Aesir, seed of Fyris plain, cairn roof of Hulgi, fire of all waters and of the hand, stone and reef, or gleam of the hand. 33. Wherefore is gold called Aegir's fire? This tale is to the same purport as we have told before. Aegir went to Asgard to a feast, but when he was ready to return home, he invited Odin and all the Aesir to visit him in 3 months' time. First came Odin and Njordr, Freyr, Tyr, Bragi, Vidar, Loki, likewise the Asinjur, Frigg, Freyja, Gefjun, Skadi, Idun, Sif. Thor was not there, having gone into the eastern lands to slay trolls. When the gods had sat down in their places, straightway Aegir had bright gold brought in onto the floor of the hall, and the gold gave forth light and illumined the hall like fire. And it was used there for lights at his banquet, even as in Valhalla swords were used in place of fire. Then Loki bandied sharp words with all the gods, and slew one of Aegir's thralls, him who was called Five-Finger. Another of his thralls was named Fire-Kindler. Ran is the name of Aegir's wife, and their daughters are 9, even as we have written before. At this feast all things were self-served, both food and ale, and all implements needful to the feast. Then the Aesir became aware that Ran had that net wherein she was wont to catch all men who go upon the sea. Now this tale is to show whence it comes that gold is called fire or light or brightness of Aegir, of Ran, or of Aegir's daughters. And now such use is made of these metaphors that gold is called fire of the sea and of all names of the sea, even as Aegir or Ran had names associated with the sea. Therefore gold is now called fire of waters or of rivers, and of all river names. But these names have fared just as other figures also have done. The later skalds have composed after the examples of the old skalds, even those examples which stood in their poems, but were later expanded into such forms as seemed to later poets to be like what was written before, as a lake is to the sea, or the river to the lake, or the brook to the river. Therefore all these are now called new figures, when terms are expanded to greater length than what was recorded before. And all this seems well and good so far as it concurs with verisimilitude in nature. As Bragi the Skald sang, I was given by the battler the fire of the brook of sea fish. He gave it me with mercy for the drink of the mountain giant. 34. Why is gold called the needles or leaves of Glasir? In Asgard, before the doors of Valhalla, there stands a grove which is called Glasir, and its leafage is all red gold, even as is sung here. Glasir stands with golden leafage before the high gods' halls. Far and wide, this tree is the fairest known among gods and men. 35. Why is gold called Sif's hair? Loki Laufeyarson, for mischief's sake, cut off all Sif's hair. But when Thor learned of this, he seized Loki, and would have broken every bone in him, had he not sworn to get the black elves to make Sif hair of gold, such that it would grow like other hair. After that, Loki went to those dwarves who are called Ivaldi's sons, and they made the hair, and Skidbladnir also, and the spear which became Odin's possession, and was called Gungnir. Then Loki wagered his head with the dwarf called Brokkr, that Brokkr's brother Sindri could not make 3 other precious things equal in virtue to these. Now when they came to the smithy, Sindri laid a pigskin in the hearth, and bade Brokkr blow, and did not cease work until he took out of the hearth that which he had laid therein. But when he went out of the smithy, while the other dwarf was blowing, straightway a fly settled upon his hand and stung. Yet he blew on as before, until the smith took the work out of the hearth, and it was a boar, with mane and bristles of gold. Next He laid gold in the hearth, and bade Brokkr blow and cease not from his blast until he should return. He went out, but again the fly came and settled on Brokkr's neck, and bit now half again as hard as before, yet he blew even until the smith took from the hearth that gold ring which is called Draupnir. Then Sindri laid iron in the hearth, and bade him blow, saying that it would be spoiled if the blast failed. Straightway the fly settled between Brokkr's eyes and stung his eyelid, but when the blood fell into his eyes so that he could not see, then he clutched at it with his hand as swiftly as he could, while the bellows grew flat, and he swept the fly from him. Then the smith came thither and said that it had come near to spoiling all that was in the hearth. Then he took from the forge a hammer, put all the precious works into the hands of Brokkr his brother, and bade him go with them to Asgard and claim the wager. Now when he and Loki brought forward the precious gifts, the ^sir sat down in the seats of judgment, and that verdict was to prevail which Odin, Thor, and Freyr should render. Then Loki gave Odin the spear Gungnir, and to Thor the hair which Sif was to have, and Skidbladnir to Freyr, and told the virtues of all these things, that the spear would never stop in its thrust, the hair would grow to the flesh as soon as it came upon Sif's head, and Skidbladnir would have a favoring breeze as soon as the sail was raised, in whatsoever direction it might go, but could be folded together like a napkin, and be kept in Freyr's pouch if he so desired. Then Brokkr brought forward his gifts. He gave to Odin the ring, saying that 8 rings of the same weight would drop from it every 9th night. To Freyr he gave the boar, saying that it could run through air and water better than any horse, and it could never become so dark with night or gloom of the murky regions that there should not be sufficient light where he went, such was the glow from its mane and bristles. Then he gave the hammer to Thor, and said that Thor might smite as hard as he desires, whatsoever might be before him, and the hammer would not fail, and if he threw it at anything it would never miss, and never fly so far as not to return to his hand. And if he desired, he might keep it in his sark, it was so small. But indeed it was a flaw in the hammer that the forehaft was somewhat short. This was their decision, that the hammer was best of all the precious works, and in it there was the greatest defense against the Rime Giants, and they gave sentence that the dwarf should have his wager. Then Loki offered to redeem his head, but the dwarf said that there was no chance of this. "Take me then," quoth Loki, but when Brokkr would have laid hands on him, he was a long way off. Loki had with him those shoes with which he ran through air and over water. Then the dwarf prayed Thor to catch him, and Thor did so. Then the dwarf would have hewn off his head, but Loki said that he might have the head, but not the neck. So the dwarf took a thong and a knife, and would have bored a hole in Loki's lips and stitched his mouth together, but the knife did not cut. Then Brokkr said that it would be better if his brother's awl were there, and even as he named it, the awl was there, and pierced the lips. He stitched the lips together, and Loki ripped the thong out of the edges. That thong, with which Loki's mouth was sewn together, is called Vartari. Section 36. One may hear how gold is metaphorically called Fulla's snood in this verse which Eyvindr Skald Despoiler wrought. Fulla's shining fillet, the forehead's sun at rising, shone on the swelling shield hill for Skalds all Hakon's life days. Section 37. Gold is called Freyja's tears, as was said before. So sang Skuli Thorsteinsson. Many a fearless swordsman received the tears of Freyja, the morn when foemen we murdered, we were present. And as Einar Skulason sang, where mounted 'twixt the carvings the tear of Mardul lieth, we bear the axe shield splitting, swollen with serpent's lair gold. And here Einar has further paraphrased Freyja, so as to call her mother of Hnoss, or wife of Odr, as standeth below. The shield, tempest strong roof ice, with tear gold is unminished. Eye-rain of Odr's bedmate, his age the king so useth. And again thus: Horn's child, the glorious adornment I own, gold wound. a jewel most fair. To the shield's rim fast is the golden sea-flame. On the gem, Freyr's niece, the tear-drift of the forehead of her mother she bears. The raven-feeder gave me Frodi's seed-gold's fostering. It is also recorded here that one may periphrase Freyja by calling her sister of Freyr. And thus also, a defence of songs full goodly he freely gave me, neighbour of sea-scales. I praise gladly Njordr's daughter's golden gem-child. Here she is called daughter of Njordr, and again thus, the awesome stately urger of Odin, he who raises the struggle stern, gave to me the courage stalwart daughter of the Vana bride, my fair axe. The valorous sword mote's ruler led Gefn's girl to the skald's bed, set with the sea flame's gold work. Here she is called Gefn, and bride of the Vanir. It is proper to join tears with all the names of Freyja, and to call gold by such terms, and in diverse ways these periphrases have been varied, so that gold is called hail, or rain, or snowstorm, or drops, or showers, or waterfalls of Freyja's eyes, or cheeks, or brows, or eyelids. Section 38. In this place one may hear that gold is called word or voice of giants, as we have said before. Thus sang Bragi the Skald. Then had I the third friend fairly praised, the poorest in the voice of the botched knob's Ali, but best of all to me. He called a rock botched knob, and a giant Ali of rock, and gold voice of the giant. Section 39. For what reason is gold called Otter's Wergild? It is related that when certain of the Aesir, Odin and Loki and Hymir, went forth to explore the earth, they came to a certain river and proceeded along the river to a waterfall. And beside the fall was an otter, which had taken a salmon from the fall, and was eating, blinking his eyes the while. Then Loki took up a stone and cast it at the otter and struck its head. And Loki boasted in his catch that he had got otter and salmon with one blow. Then they took up the salmon and the otter and bore them along with them, and coming to the buildings of a certain farm they went in. Now the husbandman who dwelt there was named Hreidmar. He was a man of much substance and very skilled in black magic. The Aesir asked him for a night's lodging, saying that they had sufficient food with them, and showed him their catch. But when Hreidmar saw the otter, straightway he called to him his sons, Fafnir and Regin, and told them that the otter their brother was slain, and who had done that deed. Now father and sons went up to the Aesir, seized them, bound them, and told them about the otter, how he was Hreidmar's son. The Aesir offered a ransom for their lives, as much wealth as Hreidmar himself desired to appoint, and a covenant was made between them on those terms, and confirmed with oaths. Then the otter was flayed, and Hreidmar, taking the otter skin, bade them fill the skin with red gold, and also cover it altogether, and that should be the condition of the covenant between them. Thereupon Odin sent Loki into the land of the Black Elves, and he came to the dwarf who was called Andvari, who was as a fish in the water. Loki caught him in his hands and required of him in ransom of his life all the gold that he had in his rock. And when they came within the rock, the dwarf brought forth all the gold he had, and it was very much wealth. Then the dwarf quickly swept under his hand one little gold ring, but Loki saw it, and commanded him to give over the ring. The dwarf prayed him not to take the ring from him, saying that from this ring he could multiply wealth for himself if he might keep it. Loki answered that he should not have one penny left, and took the ring from him and went out. But the dwarf declared that that ring should be the ruin of every one who should come into possession of it. Loki replied that this seemed well enough to him, and that this condition should hold good, provided that he himself brought it to the ears of them that should receive the ring and the curse. He went his way and came to Hreidmar's dwelling, and showed the gold to Odin. But when Odin saw the ring, it seemed fair to him, and he took it away from the treasure and paid the gold to Hreidmar. Then Hreidmar filled the otter skin as much as he could, and set it up when it was full. Next Odin went up, having the skin to cover with gold, and he bade Hreidmar look whether the skin were yet altogether hidden. But Hreidmar looked at it searchingly, and saw one of the hairs of the snout, and commanded that this be covered, else their covenant should be at an end. Then Odin drew out the ring, and covered the hair, saying that they were now delivered from their debt for the slaying of the otter. But when Odin had taken his spear and Loki his shoes, and they had no longer any need to be afraid, then Loki declared that the curse which Andvari had uttered should be fulfilled, that this ring and this gold should be the destruction of him who received it, and that was fulfilled afterward. Now it has been told wherefore gold is called Otter's Wergild, or forced payment of the Aesir, or metal of strife. 40. What more is to be said of the gold? Hreidmar took the gold for his son's Wergild, but Fafnir and Reginn claimed some part of their brother's blood money for themselves. Hreidmar would not grant them 1 penny of the gold. This was the wicked purpose of those brethren. They slew their father for the gold. Then Reginn demanded that Fafnir share the gold with him, half for half. Fafnir answered that there was little chance of his sharing it with his brother, seeing that he had slain his father for its sake, and he bade Reginn go hence, else he should fare even as Hreidmar. Fafnir had taken the helmet which Hreidmar had possessed, and set it upon his head. This helmet was called the Helm of Terror, of which all living creatures that see it are afraid, and the sword called Hrati. Reginn had that sword which was named Raphael. So he fled away, and Fafnir went up to Gnita Heath and made himself a lair, and turned himself into a serpent and laid him down upon the gold. Then Reginn went to King Hjalprekr at Tjod, and there he became his smith. And he took into his fostering Sigurdur, son of Sigmundr, Volsungr's son, and of Hjordis, daughter of Eylimi. Sigurdur was most illustrious of all host kings, in race, in prowess, and in mind. Reginn declared to him where Fafnir lay on the gold, and incited him to seek the gold. Then Reginn fashioned the sword Gramr, which was so sharp that Sigurdur, bringing it down into running water, cut asunder a flock of wool which drifted downstream onto the sword's edge. Next Sigurdur clove Reginn's anvil down to the stock with the sword. After that they went, Sigurdur and Reginn, to Gnita Heath, and there Sigurdur dug a pit in Fafnir's way, and laid himself in ambush therein. And when Fafnir glided toward the water and came above the pit, Sigurdur straightway thrust his sword through him, and that was his end. Then Reginn came forward, saying that Sigurdur had slain his brother, and demanded as a condition of reconciliation that he take Fafnir's heart and roast it with fire. And Reginn laid him down and drank the blood of Fafnir, and settled himself to sleep. But when Sigurdur was roasting the heart, and thought that it must be quite roasted, he touched it with his finger to see how hard it was, and then the juice ran out from the heart onto his finger, so that he was burned and put his finger to his mouth. As soon as the heart's blood came upon his tongue, straightway he knew the speech of birds, and he understood what the nuthatches were saying, which were sitting in the trees. Then one spake: "There sits Sigurdur, blood besprinkled, Fafnir's heart with flame he roasteth. Wise seemed to me the spoiler of rings, if the gleaming life fibre he ate." "There lies Reginn," sang another, "rede he ponders, would betray the youth who trusteth in him. In his wrath he plots wrong accusation, the smith of bale would avenge his brother." Then Sigurdur went over to Reginn and slew him, and thence to his horse, which was named Grani, and rode till he came to Fafnir's lair. He took up the gold, trussed it up in his saddle-bags, laid it upon Grani's back, mounted up himself, and then rode his ways. Now the tale is told why gold is called Lair or Abode of Fafnir, or Metal of Gnita Heath, or Grani's Burden. 41. Then Sigurdr rode on till he found a house on the mountain, wherein a woman in helm and byrnie lay sleeping. He drew his sword and cut the byrnie from her. She awoke then, and gave her name as Hildr. She is called Brynhildr, and was a Valkyr. Sigurdr rode away, and came to the king who was named Gjuki, whose wife was Grimhildr. Their children were Gunnar, Hugni, Gudrun, Gudni. Gotthormr was Gjuki's stepson. Sigurdr tarried there a long time, and then he obtained the hand of Gudrun, daughter of Gjuki, and Gunnar and Hugni swore oaths of blood brotherhood with Sigurdr. Thereafter Sigurdr and the sons of Gjuki went unto Atli, Budli's son, to sue for the hand of Brynhildr his sister in marriage to Gunnar. Brynhildr abode on Hinda fell, and about her hall there was a flaring fire, and she had made a solemn vow to take none but that man who should dare to ride through the flaring fire. Then Sigurdr and the sons of Gjuki, who were also called Niflungs, rode up onto the mountain, and Gunnar should have ridden through the flaring fire, but he had the horse named Goti, and that horse dared not leap into the fire. So they exchanged shapes, Sigurdr and Gunnar, and names likewise, for Grani would go under no man but Sigurdr. Then Sigurdr leapt onto Grani and rode through the flaring fire. That eve he was wedded with Brynhildr. But when they came to bed, he drew the sword Gramr from its sheath and laid it between them. In the morning when he arose and clothed himself, he gave Brynhildr as linen fee the same gold ring which Loki had taken from Andvari, and took another ring from her hand for remembrance. Then Sigurdr mounted his horse and rode to his fellows, and he and Gunnar changed shapes again, and went home to Gjuki with Brynhildr. Sigurdr and Gudrun had 2 children, Sigmundr and Svanhildr. It befell on a time that Brynhildr and Gudrun went to the water to wash their hair, and when they came to the river, Brynhildr waded out from the bank well into the river, saying that she would not touch to her head the water which ran out of the hair of Gudrun, since herself had the more valorous husband. Then Gudrun went into the river after her, and said that it was her right to wash her hair higher upstream, for the reason that she had to husband such a man as neither Gunnar nor any other in the world matched in valor, seeing that he had slain Fafnir and Regin, and succeeded to the heritage of both. And Brynhildr made answer: it was a matter of greater worth that Gunnar rode through the flaring fire, and Sigurdr durst not. Then Gudrun laughed and said: "Dost thou think that Gunnar rode through the flaring fire? Now I think that he who went into the bride bed with thee was the same that gave me this gold ring, and the gold ring which thou bearest on thine hand and didst receive for linen fee is called Andvari's Yield, and I believe that it was not Gunnar who got that ring on Gnita Heath." Then Brynhildr was silent and went home. After that she egged on Gunnar and Hugni to slay Sigurdr, but because they were Sigurdr's sworn blood brothers, they stirred up Gotthormr their brother to slay him. He thrust his sword through Sigurdr as he slept, but when Sigurdr felt the wound, he hurled his sword Gramr after Gotthormr, so that it cut the man asunder at the middle. There fell Sigurdr and Sigmundr, his son of 3 winters, whom they slew. Then Brynhildr stabbed herself with a sword, and she was burned with Sigurdr. But Gunnar and Hugni took Fafnir's heritage and Andvari's Yield, and ruled the lands thereafter. King Atli, Budli's son and brother of Brynhildr, then wedded Gudrun, whom Sigurdr had had to wife, and they had children. King Atli invited to him Gunnar and Hugni, and they came at his invitation. Yet before they departed from their land, they hid the gold, Fafnir's heritage, in the Rhine, and that gold has never since been found. Now King Atli had a host in readiness, and fought with Gunnar and Hugni, and they were made captive. King Atli bade the heart be cut out of Hugni alive, and that was his end. Gunnar he caused to be cast into a den of serpents. But a harp was brought secretly to Gunnar, and he struck it with his toes, his hands being bound. He played the harp so that all the serpents fell asleep, saving only one adder, which glided over to him and gnawed into the cartilage of his breastbone so far that her head sank within the wound, and she clove to his liver till he died. Gunnar and Hogni were called Niflungs and Gjukungs, for which reason gold is called treasure or heritage of the Niflungs. A little while after, Gudrun slew her 2 sons, and caused flagons to be made of their skulls, set with gold and silver. Then the funeral feast was held for the Niflungs, and at this feast Gudrun had mead poured into the flagons for King Atli, and the mead was mixed with the blood of the boys. Moreover, she caused their hearts to be roasted and set before the king, that he might eat of them. And when he had eaten, then she herself told him what she had done, with many scathing words. There was no lack of strong drink there, so that most of the company had fallen asleep where they sat. That night she went to the king while he slept, and Hogni's son with her. They smote the king, and that was the death of him. Then they set fire to the hall, and burned the folk that were within. After that she went to the shore and leaped into the sea, desiring to make an end of herself. But she was tossed by the billows over the firth, and was borne to King Jonakr's land. And when he saw her, he took her to him and wedded her, and they had 3 sons, called Surli, Hamdir, and Erpr. They were all raven black of hair, like Gunnar and Hogni and the other Niflungs. There Svanhildr, daughter of the youth Sigurdur, was reared, and of all women she was fairest. King Jormunrekkr the Mighty learned of her beauty, and sent his son Randver to woo her and bring her to be his wife. When Randver had come to the court of Jonakr, Svanhildr was given into his hands, and he should have brought her to King Jormunrekkr. But Earl Biki said that it was a better thing for Randver to wed Svanhildr, since he and she were both young, whereas Jormunrekkr was old. This counsel pleased the young folk well. Thereupon Biki reported the matter to the king. Straightway King Jormunrekkr commanded that his son be seized and led to the gallows. Then Randver took his hawk and plucked off its feathers, and bade that it be sent so to his father, after which he was hanged. But when King Jormunrekkr saw the hawk, suddenly it came home to him that even as the hawk was featherless and powerless to fly, so was his kingdom shorn of its might, since he was old and childless. Then King Jormunrekkr, riding out of the wood where he had been hunting, beheld Svanhildr as she sat washing her hair. They rode upon her and trod her to death under their horses' feet. But when Gudrun learned of this, she urged on her sons to take vengeance for Svanhildr. When they were preparing for their journey, she gave them byrnies and helmets so strong that iron could not bite into them. She laid these instructions upon them, that when they were come to King Jormunrekkr, they should go up to him by night as he slept. Surli and Hamdir should hew off his hands and feet, and Erpr his head. But when they were on their way, they asked Erpr what help they might expect from him if they met King Jormunrekkr. He answered that he would render them such aid as the hand affords the foot. They said that that help which the foot received from the hand was altogether nothing. They were so wroth with their mother that she had sent them away with angry words, and they desired so eagerly to do what would seem worse to her, that they slew Erpr because she loved him most of all. A little later, while Surli was walking, one of his feet slipped, and he supported himself on his hand. And he said, "Now the hand assists the foot indeed. It were better now that Erpr were living." Now when they came to King Jormunrekkr by night, where he was sleeping, and hewed hands and feet off him, he awoke and called upon his men and bade them arise. And then Hamdir spake, saying, "The head had been off by now, if Erpr lived." Then the henchmen rose up and attacked them, but could not overmaster them with weapons. And Jormunrekkr called out to them to beat them with stones, and it was done. There Surli and Hamdir fell, and now all the house and offspring of Gjuki were dead. A daughter named Aslaug lived after young Sigurdur. She was reared with Heimir and Himdalir, and great houses are sprung from her. It is said that Sigmundr, Volsungr's son, was so strong that he could drink venom and receive no hurt. And Sinfjutli his son and Sigurdr were so hard-skinned that no venom from without could harm them. Wherefore Bragi the Skald has sung thus: When the wriggling serpent of the Volsung's drink hung writhing on the hook of the foeman of Hill Giants' kindred. Most skalds have made verses and diverse short tales from these sagas. Bragi the Old wrote of the fall of Surli and Hamdir in that song of praise which he composed on Ragnar Lodbrok. Once Jormunrekkr awakened to an ill dream, mid the princes blood-stained, while swords were swirling. A brawl burst into the dwelling of Randver's royal kinsmen, when the raven-swarthy brothers of Erpr took vengeance for all the bitter sorrows. The bloody dew of corpses, o'er the king's couch streaming, fell on the floor, where severed, feet and hands blood-dripping were seen. In the ale-cup's fountain he fell headlong, gore-blended. On the shield, leaf of the bushes of Leifi's land, 'tis painted. There stood the shielded swordsman, steel biting not, surrounding the king's couch, and the brethren Hamdir and Surli quickly to the earth were beaten by the prince's order. To the bride of Odin with hard stones were battered. The swirling weapons Urger bade Gjuki's race be smitten sore, who from life were eager to ravish Svanhildr's lover. And Alpe Jonakr's offspring with the fair piercing weapon, the render of blue burnies, with bitter thrusts and edges. I see the heroes' slaughter on the fair shield-rimmed surface. Ragnar gave me the ship Moon with many tales marked on it. Section 42. Why is gold called Frodi's meal? This is the tale thereof. One of Odin's sons, named Skjoldr, from whom the Skjoldungs are come, had his abode and ruled in the realm which now is called Denmark, but then was known as Gotland. Skjoldr's son, who ruled the land after him, was named Fridleifr. Fridleifr's son was Frodi. He succeeded to the kingdom after his father, in the time when Augustus Caesar imposed peace on all the world. At that time Christ was born. But because Frodi was mightiest of all kings in the northern lands, the peace was called by his name wherever the Danish tongue was spoken, and men call it the Peace of Frodi. No man injured any other, even though he met face to face his father's slayer or his brother's, loose or bound. Neither was there any thief nor robber then, so that a gold ring lay long on Jalangr's heath. King Frodi went to a feast in Sweden at the court of the king who is called Fjolnir, and there he bought 2 maidservants, Fenja and Menja. They were huge and strong. In that time 2 millstones were found in Denmark, so great that no one was so strong that he could turn them. The nature of the mill was such that whatsoever he who turned asked for was ground out by the millstones. This mill was called Groti. He who gave King Frodi the mill was named Hengikjupr. King Frodi had the maidservants led to the mill, and bade them grind gold, and they did so. First they ground gold and peace and happiness for Frodi, then he would grant them rest or sleep no longer than the cuckoo held its peace, or a song might be sung. It is said that they sang the song which is called the Lay of Groti, and this is its beginning. Now are we come to the king's house, the 2 foreknowing, Fenja and Menja. These are with Frodi, son of Fridleifr, the mighty maidens, as maid thralls held. And before they ceased their singing they ground out a host against Frodi, so that the sea king called Mysingr came there that same night and slew Frodi, taking much plunder. Then the peace of Frodi was ended. Mysingr took Groti with him, and Fenja and Menja also, and bade them grind salt. And at midnight they asked whether Mysingr would not weary of salt. He bade them grind longer. They had ground but a little while when down sank the ship, and from that time there has been a whirlpool in the sea where the water falls through the hole in the millstone. It was then that the sea became salt. THE LAY OF GROTI. They to the flour mill were led, those maidens, and bidden tirelessly to turn the gray millstone. He promised to neither peace nor surcease till he had heard the handmaids singing. They chanted the song of the ceaseless millstone: Lay we the bins right, lift we the stones. He urged the maidens to grind on ever. They sung and slung the whirling stone till the men of Frodi for the most part slept. Then spake Menja to the mill coming: Wealth grind we for Frodi, we grind it in plenty, fullness of fee at the mill of fortune. Let him sit on riches and sleep on down, let him wake and wheel, then well 'tis ground. Here may no one harm another, contrive evil, nor cast wiles for slaying, nor slaughter any with sword well sharpened, though his brother's slayer in bonds he find. But he spake no word save only this: Sleep ye no longer than the hall cuckoo's silence, nor longer than so, while one song is sung. Thou wast not, Frodi, full in wisdom, thou friend of men, when thou boughtest the maidens, didst choose for strength and outward seeming, but of their kindred didst not inquire. Hardy was Hrungnir and his father, yet was Thjazi than they more mighty. Idi and Aurnir of us twain are kinsmen, brothers of hill giants, of them were we born. Grotti had not come from the gray mountain, nor the hard boulder from the earth's bosom, nor thus would grind the hill giant's maiden, if any had known the news of her. We 9 winters were playmates together, mighty of stature. 'Neath the earth's surface the maids had part in mighty works. Ourselves we moved mighty rocks from their place. We rolled the rock o'er the giant's roof-stead, so that the ground quaking gave before us. So slung we the whirling stone, the mighty boulder, till men took it. And soon after in Sweden's realm we twain, foreknowing, strode to the fighting. Bears we hunted and shields we broke. We strode through the gray-mailed spear-host. We cast down a king, we crowned another. To Gotthormr good we gave assistance. No quiet was there ere Knui fell. This course we held those years continuous, that we were known for warriors mighty. There with sharp spears wounds we scored, let blood from wounds, and reddened the brand. Now are we come to the king's abode, of mercy bereft, and held as bondmaids. Clay eats our foot-soles, cold chills us above. We turn the peace grinder, 'tis gloomy at Frodi's. Hands must rest, the stone must halt. Enough have I turned, my toil ceases. Now may the hands have no remission, till Frodi hold the meal ground fully. The hands should hold the hard shafts, the weapons gore-stained. Wake thou, Frodi! Wake thou, Frodi! If thou wouldst hearken to the songs of us twain, and to ancient stories. Fire I see burning east of the burg, war tidings waken, a beacon of warning. A host shall come hither with swiftness, and fire the dwellings above King Frodi. Thou shalt not hold the stead of Hleidr, the red gold rings, nor the god's holy altar. We grasp the handle. Maiden more hardly, we were not warmer in the wound-gore of corpses. My father's maid mightily ground, for she saw the feyness of men full many. The sturdy posts from the flower-box started, made staunch with iron. Grind we yet swifter. Grind we yet swifter, the son of Yrsa, Halfdanr's kinsman, shall come with vengeance on Frodi's head. Him shall men call Yrsa's son and brother. We both know that. The maidens ground, their might they tested, young and fresh in giant frenzy. The bin poles trembled and burst the flower box, in sunder burst the heavy boulder. And the sturdy bride of Hill Giant spake: We have ground, O Frodi, soon we cease from grinding. The women have labored o'er long at the grist. Thus sang Einar Skulason: I have heard that Frodi's handmaids ground in the mill full gladly the serpent's couch. With gold meal the king lets peace be broken. The fair cheeks of my axe head, fitted with maple, show forth Fenja's grist. Exalted is the skald with the good king's riches. So sang Egill. Glad are full many men in Frodi's meal. Section 43. Why is gold called Kraki's seed? In Denmark there was a king called Hrolfr Kraki. He was most renowned of all ancient kings for munificence, valor, and graciousness. One evidence of his graciousness, which is often brought into stories, is this. A little lad and poor, Vugr by name, came into the hall of King Hrolfr. At that time the king was young and of slender stature. Vugr came into his presence and looked up at him, and the king said, "What wouldst thou say, lad, for thou lookest at me?" Vugr answered, "When I was at home, I heard say that Hrolfr the king at Hleidr was the greatest man in the northern lands. But now there sitteth in the high seat a little Pole, and he is called king." Then the king made answer, "Thou, boy, hast given me a name, so that I shall be called Hrolfr the Pole (Kraki), and it is the custom that the giving of a name be accompanied by a gift. Now I see that with the name which thou hast fastened on me, thou hast no gift such as would be acceptable to me, wherefore he that has wherewith to give shall give to the other." And he took from his hand a gold ring and gave it to him. Then Vugr said, "Above all kings be thou most blessed of givers. Now I swear an oath that I shall be that man's slayer who slays thee." Then spake the king, laughing loudly, "Vugr is pleased with a small thing." Another example is the tale told concerning the valor of Hrolfr Kraki. That king whom men call Adils ruled over Uppsala. He had to wife Yrsa, mother of Hrolfr Kraki. He was at strife with the king who ruled over Norway, whose name was Ali. The two joined battle on the ice of the lake called Vaeni. King Adils sent an embassy to Hrolfr Kraki his stepson, praying him to come to his aid, and promised wages to all his host so long as they should be away. King Hrolfr himself should have 3 precious gifts, whatsoever 3 he might choose from all Sweden. King Hrolfr could not make the journey in person, owing to the strife in which he was engaged with the Saxons, but he sent to Adils his 12 berserks. Budvar Bjarki was there for one, and Hjalti the stout-hearted, Fitzerker the stern, Vutr Veseti, and the brethren Svipdagr and Baigudr. In that battle King Ali fell, and the great part of his host with him, and King Adils took from him in death the helm Battle Swine and his horse Raven. Then the berserks of Hrolfr Kraki demanded for their hire 3 pounds of gold for each man of them, and in addition they required that they might bear to Hrolfr Kraki those gifts of price which they had chosen for him, which were the helm Battle Boar and the Bernie Finn's Heritage, on neither of which iron would take hold, and the gold ring, which was called Pig of the Swedes, which Adil's forefathers had had. But the king denied them all these things, nor did he so much as pay their hire. The berserks went away ill-pleased with their share, and told the state of things to Hrolfr Kraki. Straightway he began his journey to Uppsala, and when he had brought his ships into the river Fyri, he rowed at once to Uppsala and his 12 berserks with him, all without safe conduct. Yrsa his mother welcomed him and led him to lodgings, but not to the king's hall. Fires were made there before them, and ale was given them to drink. Then men of King Adils came in and heaped firewood onto the fire, and made it so great that the clothes were burnt off Hrolfr and his men. And the fellow spake, "Is it true that Hrolfr Kraki and his berserks shun neither fire nor iron?" Then Hrolfr Kraki leapt up, and all they that were with him, and he said, "Add we to the fire in Adil's dwelling," took his shield and cast it onto the fire, and leapt over the flames while the shield burnt, and he spake again, "He flees not the flames who o'er the fire leapeth." Even so did his men one after another, and they laid hands on those fellows who had heaped by the fire, and cast them into the flames. Then Yrsa came and gave Hrolfr Kraki a deer's horn full of gold, the ring pig of the Swedes being with the gold, and she bade them ride away to the host. They vaulted onto their horses and rode down into the plain of the Fyri, and soon they saw King Adils riding after them with his host all in armor, hoping to slay them. Then Hrolfr Kraki plunged his right hand down into the horn, grasped the gold, and strewed it all about the road. When the Swedes saw that, they leapt down out of their saddles, and each took up as much as he could lay hold of. But King Adils bade them ride on, and himself rode furiously. His horse was called Slungvir, swiftest of all horses. Then Hrolfr Kraki saw that King Adils was drawing close up to him, took the ring, pig of the Swedes, and threw it toward him, and bade him receive it as a gift. King Adils rode at the ring, and thrust at it with his spear point, and let it slide down over the shaft's socket. Then Hrolfr Kraki turned back and saw how he bent down, and spake: "Now I have made him who is mightiest of Swedes stoop as a swine stoops." Thus they parted. For this cause gold is called Seed of Kraki, or of Fyri's Plain. Thus sang Eyvindr Skald Despoiler: God of the blade of battle, we bear through Hakon's life days the seed of Fyri's valley on our arms, where sits the falcon. Even as Tildofr sang: the king sows the bright seed corn of Knuckle's splendid gold rings, with the crop of Yrsa's offspring in his company's glad hand grasp. The guileless land director with Kraki's gleaming barley sprinkles my arms, the flesh-grown seat of the hooded falcon. Section 44. It is said that the king called Hulgi, from whom Halogaland is named, was the father of Thorgerdr Holgabrudur. Sacrifice was made to both of them, and a cairn was raised over Hulgi. 1 layer of gold or silver, that was the sacrificial money, and another layer of mold and stones. Thus sang Skuli Thorsteinsson: When I redden Reifnir's roof-bane, the ravening sword for wealth's sake at Svoldr, I heaped with gold rings warlike Hulgi's cairn thatch. In the ancient Bjarkamal many terms for gold are told. It says there: the king most gift-gracious, his guardsmen enriched, with Fenja's labor, with Fafnir's Midgard, Glasir's bright needles, Grani's fair burden, Draupnir's dear dripping, down of Grafvitnir. The free-handed lord gave, the heroes accepted, Sif's firm-grown tresses, ice of the bow-force, otter-gild unwilling, weeping of Mardul, fire-flame of Orun, Idi's fine speeches. The warrior rejoiced. We walked in fair garments, in Thjazi's councils, the people's host countless, in the Rhine's red metal, wrangling of Niflungs, the leader war-daring warded Baldr not. Section 45. Gold is metaphorically termed fire of the hand, or of the limb, or of the leg, because it is red. But silver is called snow or ice or hoarfrost, because it is white. In like manner, gold or silver may be periphrased in metaphors of purse or crucible or lather, and both silver and gold may be called handstone or necklace of any man who was wont to have a necklace. Necklaces and rings are both silver and gold, if no other distinction is raised. As Thorleikr the Fair sang: the kindly prince the load casts of crucibles on the hawk-seats of thanes, the wrists embellished, gives embers of the arm-joint. And as Einar Tinkling Scale sang: the land-strong king of Lund breaks the golden limb-brands. I think the prince of warriors lacks not the Rhine's bright pebbles. Thus sang Einar Skulason: the purse-snow and the sea-fire lie on both sides of the axe-head blood-spilling. 'Tis my office to praise our foeman's scather. And as he sang further: the sea-glow each day standeth o'er the crucible's white snowdrift, and the shield, ship's cheeks protecting, shelters a heart most lavish. Ne'er can one melt the silver, flagon snow in the fire-flame of the eel's stream-road. The Feller of hosts all feats performeth. Here gold is called Fire of the Eel's Stream Road, and silver Snow of Flagons. Thus sang Thordr, Miri's skald. The glad giver of the hand waste of the gold minisher perceiveth that the Hermodr of the snake's lair hath had a lordly father. 46. Man is called Breaker of Gold, even as Ottar the Swarthy sang. I needs must use the breaker of the battle glow of good men. Here is the watch, war doughty, of the wise king assembled. Or Gold Sender, as Einar Tinkling Scale sang. The sender of gold permitteth the silent earth to hearken to song. His gifts I gather, the prince his young men gladdens. Goldcaster, as Thorleikr sang. Goldcaster makes loyal to him his guard with kingly armor. Gold's adversary, as sang Thorvaldr Blending Skald. The gold's foe hot coals casteth of the arm, the king gives red wealth. The vile folk's desolator dispenseth the freight of Grani. Gold Towerer, as is written here. The Gold Towerer in friendship I got, and of the warrior, son of the glowing war blade, I make a song of praise. Woman is periphrased in metaphors of gold, being called Willow or Giver of Gold, as Hallarstein sang. He who casts the amber of Vidblindi's boar's cool salt drink, long will recall the willow of the reed snake's golden river. Here the whale is called Boar of Vidblindi. This Vidblindi was a giant who drew whales out of the sea like fishes. The drink of whales is the sea, amber of the sea is gold, woman is the willow or dealer of that gold which she gives, and the willow is a tree. Therefore, as is already shown, woman is periphrased with all manner of feminine tree names. She is also called user of that which she gives, and the word for user also signifies a log, the tree which falls in the forest. Thus sang Gunnlaugr's serpent's tongue. That dame was born to stir strife among the sons of menfolk. The war bush caused that, madly I yearned to have the wealth log. Woman is called forest, so sang Hallarstein. With a well-trained plane of singing, the tongue I have planed, my lady, dame of the first song's ale vats, forest fair of flagons. Faggot, as Stein sang. Thou shalt, O fresh sift-tender, of the flood's gold fire, like other faggots of Hjadning's gravel, break with thy good fortune. Prop, as Ormr Steinthorsson sang. The prop of stone was clothed in garments clean and seemly. A new cloak did the hero cast over the mead's bright Valkyr. Post, as Steinar sang. All my dreams of the gracious goddess of the bracelet-girded soft arms have lied to me. The stream moon's unsteadfast prop beguiled me. Birch, as Ormr sang. For a mark of the birch of the bright hollow ring, the palm flame, I laid on the dwarf flag in my song. Oak, even as stands here. The fair-shaped oak of riches stands our mirth forestalling. Linden, even as is written here. O dreadful towering elm tree of the dinning shower of weapons, our courage shall not lessen. So bade the linen's linden. Man is periphrased in tree metaphors, as we have written before. He is called Rowan, or Tester of weapons, or of combats, of expeditions and of deeds, of ships, and of all that which he wields and tests. Thus sang Ulfr Uggason. But the flashing-eyed stiff edge-rope of the earth stared past the gunwale at the rowan tree of the people of stone, the giant Tester. Tree and beam, as Kormakr sang. The beam of the murdering sword-twig is taller than are many in the din of darts. The sword wins the land for dauntless Sigurdr. Grove, as sang Hallfredr Troublous Skald. The mighty grove and faithful of the shield-murderer, budded with hair, stands in the Eastlands, safe with Ullr's ash warriors. Here he is also called Ash. Box, as Arnr sang. The box of ships bade the Regir bring the shields together at early dusk; through the spear rain of strife clouds held the autumn night. Ash, as Refr sang: The Strife Lord, gracious Giver, sought the maid's bed gold sprinkled. The Ash of Odin's war sleet won the estate of manhood. Maple, as here: Hail, maple of the ice lumps of the hand! So spake the Birnie. Tree, as Refr sang: Since I have appointed to proffer Odin's breast sea, the War God's verse to Thorstein, the Tree of Swords so wills it. Staff, as Ottar sang: Thou, fierce War Staff, maintainest maugre two kings, thy borders with heroes' kin, where the ravens starved not; keen-hearted art thou. Thorn, as Arnor sang: He gathered, the young Wealth Thorn, many great heaps of corpses for the eagles, and his henchmen guided and helped the hero. Section 47. How should battle be periphrased? By calling it storm of weapons, or of sheltering shields, or of Odin, or of the Valkyrs, or of host kings, and din and clashing. Thus sang Hornklofi: The king hath held a spear storm with heroes, where the eagles screamed at the din of Skugul; the red wounds spat out blood. Thus sang Eyvindr: And that hero at Har's tempest wore a sark of grey wolf skin. Thus sang Bersi: In earlier days I seemed not to guns war bushes useful in the sleet of Hluk; when younger we were, so 'tis said. Thus sang Einarr: The stark prince lets Hildr's shield sails take the sternest crashing storm wind of the Valkyr, where hail of bow strings drives, the sword blade hammers. As Einarr Tinkling Scale sang: The mail sarks of the warriors, firm woven, did not shelter the seemly youths 'gainst Hogni's showers of Hakon's onset. Even as here: They set the point net's edge band against the point crash Urger. And again: 'Neath eagles' claws the king's foes sank at the clash of Gundul. Section 48. Weapons and armor should be periphrased in figures of battle, and with reference to Odin and the Valkyrs and host kings. One should call a helmet cowl or hood, a birnie sark or kirtle, a shield tent, and a shield wall is termed hall and roof, wall and floor. Shields, periphrased in figures of warships, are called sun or moon or leaf or sheen or garth of the ship. The shield is also called Ship of Ullr, or periphrased in terms of Hrungnir's feet, since he stood upon his shield. On ancient shields it was customary to paint a circle, which was called the ring, and shields are called in metaphors of that ring. Hewing weapons, axes, or swords are called fires of blood or of wounds. Swords are called Odin's fires, but men call axes by the names of troll women, and periphrase them in terms of blood or wounds, or a forest or wood. Thrusting weapons are properly periphrased by calling them by names of serpents or fishes. Missile weapons are often metaphorically termed hail or sleet or storm. Variants of all these figures have been made in many ways, for they are used chiefly in poems of praise, where there is need of such metaphors. So sang Viga-Glumr: With the hanged god's helmet the hosts have ceased from going by the brink; not pleasant the bravest held the venture. Thus sang Einarr Tinkling Scale: Helm-folded strife-bold Bui, who from the south went forth into Gunn's crash, and din-swift Sigvaldi offered battle. Sark of Rodi, as Tindr sang: When came the birnied Hakon to cast away the ring-rent streaming sark of Odin, Rodi's rocking sea-steeds were cleared. Hamdir's Kirtle, as Hallfredr sang: The war-sleet hard and streaming of Egil's weapons breaketh fiercely on Hamdir's kirtles of the foremost Wave-Deer's warriors. Surli's garments, as he sang further: Thence the bright weeds of Sorli in men's blood must be reddened. I hear it clearly, wound fire in cutting showers of iron. Shields are called tents of Hluk, as Grettir sang. Hluk's tent raisers held their noses together, and the heroes of the rain-storm of Hildir's shield wall hewed at each other's beards. Rodi's roof, as Einar sang. Rodi's roof's great ice lump, for the rain of Freyja's eyelids grows not less, my fair axe-head, his age my lord so useth. Wall of Hildir, as Grettir sang, and as we have written before. Ship's Son, as Einar sang. In the sea, Olafr's kinsman reddens the flame of the Ship's Son. Moon of the Ship's Cheek, as Refr sang. Fair was the day when scatterers of arm fire thrust the clear moon of the cheek into my hand-clasp, the coiling track of red rings. Ship's Garth, as here. The swift seller of the spear crash shot through the stain-dyed prow garth as it were birch bark. Truly, he was a bitter battler. Ash of Ullr, as here. The snow gusts of Ullr's ash ship grimly o'er our prince shoot with fullness, where are tossing the fearsome covered spike spars. Blade of Hrungnir's foot soles, as Bragi sang. Wilt hear, O Hrafn-Ketil, how I shall praise the soul blade of Trudr's thief, stain covered with skill, and praise my king. Bragi the Skald sang this concerning the ring on the shield. Unless it be that Sigurdr's renowned son would have payment in good kind for the ring-nave of the ringing wheel of Hildir. He called the shield Wheel of Hildir, and the ring the Nave of the Wheel. Ring Earth, as Hallvaldr sang. The chief of ranks of combat sees the red gleaming ring earth fly in two parts. The white disk, the pictured, bursts in sunder. It is also sung, a ring befits the shield best, arrows befit the bow. A sword is Odin's fire, as Kormakr sang. The fight swelled when the warrior, the wolf's blithe feeder, in tumult fared with Odin's ringing fire flame. Urdur came forth from the well. Fire of the helm, as Ulfr Uggason sang. The very mighty maiden of the mountain made the sea-horse roll forward, but the champions of Odin's helm fire felled her wolf steed. Fire of the Birni, as Glumr Geirason sang. At that the Land Protector let the Birni's streaming fire whine, Hone wedded, he who warded him strongly 'gainst the warriors. Ice of the Rim, and Hurt of Sheltering Weapons, as Einar sang. I received the ice of red rims, with Freyja's golden eye-thaw. From the upright prince high-hearted, we bear in hand the helm's hurt. An axe is called Troll Woman of Sheltering Weapons, as Einar sang. Ryfield's sea-steed's riders may see how richly carven the dragons close are brooding 'gainst the brow of the helm ogress. A spear is called Serpent, as Refr sang. My angry murky serpent of the markings of the shield board savagely doth sport in my palms where men in strife meet. Arrows are called Hail of the Bow or Bowstring, or of the Shelters, or of Battle, as Einar Tinkling Scale sang. The hammering King of Swords shook from the sails of Hluk the bow hail. Bravely the wolf's supporter warded his life in battle. And Hallfredr, and the armor of the spear sleet, knitted with iron, saved not the satyrs of hungry ravens from the shaft hail of the bowstring. And Eyvindr's Skald Despoiler. They said, O Hord's land warder, thy spirit little faltered. When the Birni's hail in the wound burst, bent were the stringed elm bows. Section 49. Battle is called Storm or Snow Shower of the Hjadnings, and weapons are termed Fire or Wands of Hjadnings, and this is the tale thereof. That king who is called Hogni had a daughter named Hildir. Her king Hedinn son of Hjörandi, took as the spoils of war, while King Hogni attended an assembly of kings. But when he learned that there had been raiding in his realm, and his daughter had been borne off, he departed with his host to seek Hedinn, and heard tidings of him that he was proceeding northward along the land. When Hogni had come into Norway, he learned that Hedinn had sailed westward over the sea. Then Hogni sailed after him, even to the Orkneys. And when he landed at the place called Hoi, Hedinn was already there before him with his boat. Then Hildr went to meet her father, and offered him a necklace on Hedinn's behalf for reconciliation and peace. But if it were not accepted, she said, Hedinn was ready to fight, and Hogni might hope for no mercy at his hands. Hogni answered his daughter harshly, and when she returned to Hedinn, she told him that Hogni desired no reconciliation, and she bade him make ready for battle. So did both parties. They went to the island and marshaled their hosts. Then Hedinn called to Hogni his father-in-law, offering him reconciliation and much gold in compensation. But Hogni answered, "Thou hast made this offer over late, if thou wouldst make peace. For now I have drawn Dainsleif, which the dwarves made, and which must cause a man's death every time it is bared, nor ever fails in its stroke. Moreover, the wound heals not if one be scratched with it." Then said Hedinn, "Thou dost boast in the sword, but not in the victory. I call any sword good which is faithful to its lord." Then they began that famous battle, which is called the Hjadning strife, and they fought all that day, but at evening the kings went to their ships. Now Hildr went to the slain by night, and with magic quickened all those that were dead. The next day the kings went to the battlefield and fought, and so did all those that had fallen on the day before. So the fight went one day after the other. All who fell, and all those weapons which lay on the field, and the shields also, were turned to stone. But when day dawned, uprose all the dead men and fought, and all weapons were renewed. It is said in songs that in this fashion the Hjadnings shall continue until the weird of the gods. Bragi the Skald composed verses after this tale in Ragnar Lodbrok's Song of Praise. And the beloved maiden of the Vane's bloodletting purposed to bring, for wrath's sake, the bow-storm to her father. When the ring-wearing lady, the woman full of evil, bore the neck-ring of war-doom to the battler of the wind's steeds. That gory wound-amender to the glorious monarch offered the necklace not for fear's sake, at the mote of fatal weapons. Even as restraining battle she seemed, although she goaded warriors to walk the death road with the ravening wolf's dire sister. The Prince of Folk, the land god, let not the fight wolf-gladdening halt, nor slaughter on the sands cease. Hate deadly swelled in Hogni, when the stern lords of Sword Din sought Hedinn with stern weapons, rather than receive the necklet rings of Hildr. And that baleful witch of women, wasting the fruits of victory, took governance on the island o'er the axe, the Birnie's ruin. All the ship king's war host went wrathful 'neath the firm shields of Hjärandi, swift marching from Reifnir's fleet sea-horses. On the fair shield of Svolnir one may perceive the onslaught. Ragnar gave me the ship-moon, with many tales marked on it. Battle is called Storm of Odin, as is recorded above. So sang Viga Glumr. I cleared my way aforetime like earls to lands. The word went of this among the storm-staves, the men of Vidrir's sword-wand. Here battle is called Storm of Vidrir, and the sword is the wand of battle. Men are staves of the sword. Here, then, both battle and weapons are used to make metaphors for man. It is called inlaying when one writes thus. The shield is the land of weapons, and weapons are hail or rain of that land, if one employs figures of later coinage. Section 50. How should the ship be periphrased? Call it horse or deer, or snowshoe of the sea-king, or of ship's rigging, or of storm, steed of the billow, as Hornklofi sang. The counsel-stern destroyer of the pale steed of the billow. When full young let the ship's prows press on the sea at flood-tide. Geitir's steed, as Eringarstein sang. But though to the skald all people this strife from the south are telling, we shall yet load Geitir's sea steed with stone, we voyage gladly. Sveidi's reindeer. O son of Svein, strife valiant, thou comest with Sveidi's reindeer, long of seam on the seat of Sulsi, the sound deer from land glided. So sang Halvardr. Here the ship is also called Deer of the Sound, and the sea is called Zulsi's Seat. Thus sang Thordr Sjareksson. The swift steed of the gunwale around Sig veered from northward. The gust shoved Gylfi's stream's mirth, the gull's wake horse to southward of Aumar, laying fleetly both Kormt and Agdir's coastline along the stern. By Listi the leek steed lightly bounded. Here the ship is called Steed of the Gunwale, and the sea is Gylfi's land. The sea is also called Gull's Wake. The ship is called Horse, and further Horse of the Leek, for leek means mast. And again, as Markus sang: the stream's winterling waded stoutly the firth snake's snow heaps. The tusker of the masthead leaped o'er the whale's spumed housetops. The bear of the flood strode forward on the ancient paths of sea ships. The stay's bear, shower breasting, broke the reef's plashing fetter. Here the ship is called Winterling of the Stream. A bear cub is called a winterling, and a bear is called Tusker. The bear of the stay is a ship. The ship is also called Reindeer, and so Halvardr sang, as we have written before, and Hart, as King Haraldr Sigurdarson sang. By Sicily then widely the seam cut, we were stately. The sea heart glided swiftly, as we hoped beneath the heroes. And Elk, as Einar sang: the ring's mild peace dispenser, the princely hero, may not long bide with thee, if something aid not. We bound the flood's elk. And Otter, as Mani sang: what, laggard carle with grey cheeks, canst do among keen warriors on the otter of the sea waves? For thy strength is ebbing from thee. Wolf, as Refr sang: and the hoard diminisher hearkened to Thorstein. True my heart is to the Lord of the Wolf of Billows in the baleful Wrathwan's conflict. And Ox also. The ship is called Snowshoe or Wagon or Wain. Thus sang Eyjolfr the valiant skald. Late in the day the young earl in the snowshoe of landless waters fared with equal following to meet the fearless chieftain. Thus sang Styrkar Odason. Hogni's host drove the wagons of rollers o'er Heiti's snow heaps, angrily pursuing the great giver of flood embers. And as Torbjorn sang: the freighter of wave crest Sea Wain was in the font of christening, Hoard Scatterer, who was given the White Christ's highest favor. Section 51. How should one periphrase Christ? Thus, by calling him fashioner of heaven and earth, of angels and of the sun, governor of the world and of the heavenly kingdom, and of Jerusalem and Jordan and the land of the Greeks, counselor of the apostles and of the saints. Ancient skalds have written of him in metaphors of Urdur's well and Rome. As Eilifr Gudrunarsson sang: so has Rome's mighty ruler in the rocky realms confirmed his power. They say he sitteth south at the well of Urdur. Thus sang Skapti Thorodsson: the king of monks is greatest of might, for God all governs. Christ's power wrought this earth all, and raised the hall of Rome. King of the heavens, as Markus sang: the king of the wind house fashioned earth, sky, and faithful peoples. Christ, sole prince of mortals, hath power o'er all that liveth. Thus sang Eilifr Kulnasveinn: the host of the beaming world's roof and the band of illustrious bow down to the holy cross. Than all glory else the sole sun's king is brighter. Son of Mary, as Eilifr sang further: the bright host of heaven boweth to Mary's bairn. He winneth, the gentle prince, of glory the true might, God and man both. King of Angels, as Eilifr sang again: the goodly might of God's friend is better than men guess of, yet the gracious King of Angels is dearer than all and holier. King of Jordan, as Sigvatr sang: 4 angels the King of Jordan sent long ago through ether to earthward, and the stream washed the holy head of the world's Lord. King of Greeks, as Arnor sang: I have lodged for the heroes' ashes prayers with the lordly warder of Greeks and men of Gardar. Thus I pay my prince for good gifts. Thus sang Eilifr Kulasvein: the glory of heaven praises man's prince, he is king of all things. Here he called Christ first king of men, and again king of all. Einar Skulason sang: he who compasseth, bright in mercy, all the world, and gently careth for all, caused the realm of heaven to ope for the valiant ruler. Section 52. There the metaphors coincide, and he who interprets the language of poesy learns to distinguish which king is meant, for it is correct to call the Emperor of Constantinople King of Greeks, and similarly to call the king who rules over the land of Jerusalem King of Jerusalem, and also to call the Emperor of Rome King of Rome, and to call him King of Angles who governs England. But that periphrasis which was cited but now, which called Christ King of men, may be had by every king. It is proper to periphrase all kings by calling them land rulers, or land warders, or land attackers, or leader of henchmen, or warder of the people. Thus sang Eyvindr Skald Despoiler: who filled the ravens from life was reft by the earth rulers at Uglo. And as Glumr Geirason sang: the prince beneath the helmet reddened the sword hone hollowed on the Geats. There the land warder was found in the grinding spear din. As Thjodolfr sang: 'tis my wish that the glorious leader of henchmen, the glad-hearted, should leave his sons the heritage and the sod of his fair freehold. As Einar sang: the valiant-souled earth warder on his stern head the helm bears. The bard before heroes telleth the fame of the king of Hordland. It is right also to call him King of Kings, under whom are tributary kings. An emperor is highest of kings, and next under him is that king who reigns over a nation, and each of these is equal to the other in the periphrases made of them in poesy. Next to them are those men who are called earls or tributary kings, and they are equal in periphrasis with a king, save that one may not term them kings of nations. And thus sang Arnor Earl Skald concerning Earl Thorfinnr: let the men hear how the earl's king, hardy of mind, the sea sought. The overwhelming ruler failed not to thwart the ocean. Next to these, in the figures of poesy, are those men who are called chiefs. One may periphrase them as one might a king or an earl, calling them dispensers of gold, wealth munificent, men of the standards, and captains of the host, or van leaders of the array or of battle, since each king of a nation who rules over many lands appoints tributary kings and earls in joint authority with himself, to administer the laws of the land and defend it from attack in those parts which lie far removed from the king. And in those parts they shall be equal with the king's self in giving judgment and meting punishment. Now there are many districts in one land, and it is the practice of kings to appoint justiciars over as many districts as one chooses to give into their hands. These justiciars are called chiefs or landed men in the Danish tongue, reeves in Saxony, and barons in England. They are also to be righteous judges and faithful warriors over the land which is entrusted to them for governance. If the king is not near, then a standard shall be borne before them in battle, and then they are quite as lawful war captains as kings or earls. Next under them are those men who are called franklins. They are those freeholders who are of honorable kindred and possessed of full rights. One may periphrase them by calling them wealth givers and protectors and reconcilers of men. Headmen also may have these titles. Kings and earls have as their following the men called henchmen and house-carles. Landed men also have in their service those who are called henchmen in Denmark and Sweden, and house-carles in Norway. And these men swear oaths of service to them, even as henchmen do to kings. The house-carles of kings were often called henchmen in the old heathen time. Thus sang Thorvaldr Blending Skald: Hail, king, swift in the onset, and thy sturdy house-carles with thee. In their mouths men have my verses, made for a song of praising. King Haraldr Sigurdarson composed this: The man full mighty waiteth the filling of the king's seat. Oft I find to the earl's heels throngs my host of house-carles. Henchmen and house-carles may be periphrased by calling them house guard, or wage band, or men of honor. Thus sang Sigvatr: I learned the warrior's wage band on the water fought that battle newly. 'Tis not the smallest snow-shower of shields I tell of. And thus also: when on the steed of cables the clashing steel was meeting, 'twas not as when a maid bears the chief's mead to the honor winners. The service fee which headmen give is called wages and gifts. Thus sang Ottar the Swarthy: I needs must use the breaker of the battle-glow of good men. Here is the watch war-doughty of the wise king assembled. Earls and chiefs and henchmen are periphrased by calling them counselors or speech-friends, or seat-mates of the king, as Hallfredr sang: The counselor battle-mighty of the prince, whom boldness pleases, lets the feud-fiery weeds of Hogni, hammer-beaten, clash upon him. As Snaebjorn sang: The speech-friend of kings letteth the long-hulled steer-rope's race-horse steady the sword-like steel beak of the ship against the stern wave. Thus sang Arnorr: My young sons do bear for my sake grave sorrow for the slaughter of the earl, destroyed by murder, the bench-mate of our monarch. King's counsel friend, as Hallfredr sang: In council 'twas determined that the king's friend, wise in counsel, should wed the land, sole daughter of Onarr, greenly wooded. One should periphrase men by their kindred, as Kormakr sang: Let the son of Haraldr's true friend give ear and hearken to me. I raise my song, the yeast-stream of Syr's snow-covered monsters. He called the earl true friend of the king, and Hakon, son of Earl Sigurdr. And Thjodolfr sang thus concerning Haraldr: About Olafr's sire waxed the steel knife storm's ire, that of whiteness each deed is worthy fame's meed. And again: Jarizleifr could espy where the king passed by. The brave sainted lord's kin stoutly praise did win. And again he sang: Breath bereft is he who o'er all bore the gree, of chief's kinsman mild, Haraldr's brother's child. Arnorr also sang thus in Rognvaldr's song of praise: Heiti's war-good kinsman made wedlock kindred with me, the earl's strong tie of marriage made honor to us rendered. And again concerning Earl Thorfinnr he sang: The thin-made swords bit keenly old Rognvaldr's kin, to southward of Man, where rush the strong hosts under the sheltering shield-rims. And he sang further: O God, guard the glorious kin-betterer of great Turf Einar from harm. I pray show mercy to him whom faithful chiefs love. And Einar Tinkling Scale sang: The house-prop of the kindred of Hilditun shall not lack hardihood more munificent. I am bound to maintain praises. Section 53. How are the uninvolved terms of poesy made? By calling each thing by its proper name. What are the simple terms for poesy? It is called poetry, glorifying, song, laud, and praise. Bragi the Old sang this when he was travelling through a forest late at evening. A troll woman hailed him in verse, asking who passed. Trolls do call me Moon's Blank of the Giant. Storm Sun's bale, fellow in misery of the Sibyl, warder of the circled ring earth, wheel devourer of the heaven. What is the troll but that? He answered thus: Skalds do call me Vidur's shape smith, Gauter's gift finder, bard not faulty, Eager's ale bearer, song's arrayer, skilled smith of verse. What is the skald but this? And as Kormakr sang: I make more glorifying by far o'er Hakon's great son. I pay him the song atonement of the gods. In his wain Thor sitteth. And as Thordr Kolbeinsson sang: The shield maple let many swift ships and merchant craft and speedy war boats o'er the sea pour. The skald's ready song of laud waxed. Laud, as Ulfr Uggason sang: Now the stream to the sea cometh, but first the laud I sang forth of the messenger of sword rain. Thus I raised the praise of warriors. Here poesy is called praise also. Section 54. How are the gods named? They are called fetters, as Eyjolfr the valiant skald sang. Eirikr draws the lands beneath him at the pleasure of the fetters, and fashions the spear battle. And bonds, as Thjodolfr of Finn sang. The skillful god-deceiver to the bonds proved a stern sharer of bones. The helmet hooded saw somewhat hindered seething. Powers, as Einar Tinkling Scale sang. I say, the mighty powers magnify Hakon's empire. Yulnar, as Eyvindr sang. We have fashioned the feast of Yulnar, the prince's praise song, strong as a stone bridge. Deities, as Kormakr sang. The giver of lands, who bindeth the sail to the top, with gold lace honors him who pours deities verse mead. Odin wrought charms on Rindr. Section 55. These names of the heavens are recorded, but we have not found all these terms in poems, and these skaldic terms, even as others, are not meet for use in skaldic writing, methinks, unless one first finds such names in the works of chief skalds. Heaven, Hlionir, Heidtornir, Storm Mimir, Long Lying, Light Farer, Driving, Topmost Sky, Wide Fathom, Vet Mimir, Lightning, Destroyer, Wide Blue. The solar planet is called Sun, Glory, Everglow, Allbright, Sight, Fair Wheel, Healing Ray, Dvalin's Playmate, Elfin Beam, Doubtful Beam, Luminary. The lunar planet is called Moon, Waxer, Waner, Year Teller, Mock Sun, Fengari, Glamour, Haster, Crescent, Glare. Section 56. Which are the simple terms for earth? She is called Earth, as Thjodolfr sang. The hardy Point Rain's urger oft caused the harsh sword shower, ere under him the broad earth with battle he subjected. Field, as Ottar sang. The prince guards the field. Few kings are so mighty. Olafr fattens the eagle. Foremost is the Swedes' king. Ground, as Hallvardr sang. The broad ground 'neath the venom-cold adder bound lies subject to the warrior, of the island fetters heaped gold. The Hone land's lord the hoard dispenseth. Haudr, as Einar sang. Brave heroes are defending the hard Haudr of famous princes with the sword. Oft splits the helmet before the furious edge-storm. Land, as Thordr Kolbeinsson sang. The land, after the battle, was laid low from Veiga northward to Agdir south or farther. Hard is song in conflict. Fif, as Ottar sang. Thou fierce war-staff, maintainest the fief, despite two monarchs with heroes' kin, where the ravens starved not. Keen-hearted art thou. Hludin, as Volustein sang. I remember how murky earth yawned with graven mouth for the sender of the gold words of the giant, of the hard bones of green Hludin. Country, as Ulfr Uggason sang. But the flashing-eyed stiff edge-rope of the earth stared past the gunwale at the rowan tree of the country of stone, the giant Tester. Fjorgyn, as is said here: I was faithful to the free payer of the stream bed of Fjorgyn's serpent. May honor be closely guarded by the giver of the giant stream gold. 57. It is correct to periphrase blood or carrion in terms of the beast which is called Strangler, by calling them his meat and drink. It is not correct to express them in terms of other beasts. The Strangler is also called Wolf. As Thjodolfr sang: enough guesting to the Ravener was given when the son of Sigurdr came from the north, the wolf to lure from the wood to the wound. Here he is called Ravener also, Greedy One, as Egill sang: the Greedy One gashed grisly wounds when plashed the red point creek on the raven's beak. Witch Beast, as Einar sang: the Gota, cold with venom, with hot wound gush was reddened. The Witch Beast's warm drink mingled with the water in the sea poured. She-Wolf, as Arnor sang: the She-Wolf's evil kindred swallowed the corpse, harm swollen, when the green sea was turned to red, with gore commingled. Strangler, as Illugi sang: there was happiness for the Strangler when my lord pursued hosts full many. With the sword the necklet Minisher pierced the swart snake of the forest. Thus sang Haller: he sated the heath beast's hunger. The hoar Howler in wounds gladdened. The king reddened the wild one's mouth hairs. The wolf went to drink of the wound. And again, as Thordr sang: in blood Gelp's stud horse waded. The dusty pack got fullness of the Greedy One's wheat. The Howler enjoyed the Ravener's gore drink. The bear is called Wide Stepper, Cub, Winterling, Ors, Gibcat, Tusker, Youngling, Roarer, Ylfudr. Willful Sharp, She-Bear, Horse Chaser, Scratcher, Hungry One, Blomir, Bustler. The heart is called Modrudnir, Dalar, Dalar, Dain, Dvalin, Dunir, Durathror. These are the names of horses enumerated in the rhymes of Thorgrimr. Hrafn and Sleipnir, the famous horses, Valr and Letfeti. Tjaldari was there too, Goldtopr and Goti. I heard Soti told of, Mor and Lungr with Mar. Fig and Stufr were with Skevadr. Blakkr could well bear Thegn, Silfrtapr and Sinir. I heard Fakr spoken of. Gulfaxi and Yor with the gods were. Blodughofi hight a horse that they said beareth the strength eminent Atridi. Gisel and Falhofnir. Gleir and Skeidbrimir. Mention too was made of Gilir. These also are recorded in Kalsvisa. Dagr rode Drusil, and Dvalin rode Modnir. Hjelmter, Hafeti, Haki rode Fakr. The slayer of Beli rode Blodughofi, and Skevadr was ridden by the ruler of Haddings. Veststein rode Valr, and Vifil rode Stufr. Meinthjofr rode Mor. And Morgin on Fakr, Ali rode Hrafn, they who rode onto the ice. But another southward under Adils a grey one wandered, wounded with the spear. Bjorn rode Blakkr, and Bjarr rode Kertr. Atli rode Glaumr, and Adils on Slungvir. Hugni on Hulvir, and Haraldr on Fukvir. Gunnar rode Goti, and Sigurdur Grani. Arvakr and Alsvidr draw the sun, as is written before. Hrimfaxi or Fjorsvartnir draw the night. Skinfaxi and Gladr are the day's horses. These names of oxen are in Thorgrimr's rhymes. Of all oxen the names have I accurately learned. Of these, Raudr and Hifir, Rekin and Hir, Himin Hrudr and Apli, Arfur and Arfuni. These are the names of serpents: Dragon, Fafnir, Mighty Monster, Adder, Nidhugr, Lindworm, She-Adder, Goin, Moin, Grafvitnir, Grabakr, Ofnir, Svafnir, hooded one. Neat cattle: cow, calf, oxen, heifer, yearling, steer, bull. Sheep: ram, buck, ewe, lamb, wether. Swine: sow, she-pig, boar, hog, suckling. 58. What are the names of the air and of the winds? Air is called yawning void and middle world, bird abode, wind abode. Wind is called storm, breeze, gale, tempest, gust, blowing. Thus does one read in Alsvinnsmal: Wind 'tis called among menfolk, and waverer with the gods. Neigher the great powers name it, Shrieker the giants, and Shouter elves call it, and Hel Clamorer 'tis called. The wind is also called Blast. 59. Two are those birds which there is no need to periphrase otherwise than by calling blood and corpses their drink and meat. These are the raven and the eagle. All other male birds may be periphrased in metaphors of blood or corpses, and then their names are terms of the eagle or the raven. As Thjodolfr sang: The prince with eagle's barley doth feed the bloody moorfowl. The Hord King bears the sickle of Odin to the gory swan's crop. The satyr of the vulture of the eagle's sea of corpses stakes each shoal to the southward which he wards with the spear point. These are the names of the raven: crow, hugin, munin, bold of mood, yearly flyer, year teller, flesh boder. Thus sang Einarr Tinkling Scale: With flesh the host convoker filled the feathered ravens. The raven, when spears were screaming, with the she-wolf's prey was sated. Thus sang Einarr Skulason: He who gluts the gull of hatred, our precious lord, could govern the sword. The hurtful raven of Hugin's corpse-load eateth. And as he sang further: But the king's heart swelleth, his spirit flushed with battle. Where heroes shrink, dark Munin drinks blood from out the wounds. As Viga Gloomer sang: When stood the shielded maidens of the gory sword strife eager on the isle, the bold of mood then received the meat of wound blood. As Skuli Thorsteinsson sang: Not the hindmost in the 100 might Hluk of horns have seen me, where to the yearly flyer I fed the wounds full grievous. The erne is called Eagle, Old One, Storm Shearer, Inciter, Sorer, Wound Shearer, Cock. As Einarr sang: With blood the lips he reddened of the black steed of Jarnsaxa. With steel Erne's meat was furnished, the eagle slit the wolf's bait. As Ottar sang: The erne swills corpse drink, the she-wolf is sated, the eagle there feedeth, oft the wolf his fangs reddens. As Thjodolfr sang: The spoiler of the lady swiftly flew with tumult to meet the high god rulers, long hence, in Old One's plumage. And as stands here: With skill will I rehearse of the Storm Shearer my verse. And again as Skuli sang: Early and late with sobbing I wake, where well is sated the hawk of the cock's blood ocean. Then the bard heareth good tidings. 60. What are the names of the sea? It is called Ocean, Main, Wintry, Lee, Deep, Way, Weir, Salt, Lake, Furtherer. As Arnor sang, and as we have written above: Let men hear how the Earl's King, hardy of mind, the sea sought. The overwhelming ruler failed not to resist the main. Here it is named Sea and Main also. Ocean, as Hornklofi sang: When the man-scathing meter of the mansion of the rock reefs thrust the forecastle adder and the skiff out on the ocean. In the following verse it is called Lake as well. Thus sang Einarr: The lake doth bathe the vessel, where the sea 'gainst each side beateth, and the bright wind vanes rattle. The surf washes the flood steeds. Here it is called Flood also. Thus sang Refr, as was said before: Wintry One's wet cold Spae Wife wiles the bear of twisted cables oft into Aegir's wide jaws, where the angry billow breaketh. deep as Hallvardr sang. The sword shaker bids be pointed the prow of the hardy ship steed westward in the girdle of all lands, the watery deep. Way as here. On our course from land we glided on the way to the coast of Finland. I see from the ship's road eastward the fells with radiance gleaming. Weir as Egill sang. I sailed o'er the Weir to the west. I bear Odin's Heart Sea, so it stands with me. Ocean as Einarr sang. Many a day the cold ocean washes the swarthy deck planks 'neath the gracious prince, and snowstorm furrows Mona's girdle. Salt as Arnor sang. The hardy king the salt ploughed from the east with hull ice laden. Brown tempest tossed the lessener of surf gold towards Sigtun. Furtherer as Bolverkr sang. Thou didst summon from fair Norway a levy the next season. With Din Surf ships the Furtherer didst shear, o'er decks the sea poured. Here the sea is called Din Surf also. Wide One as Refr sang. To its breast the Stay's steed taketh the home of planks, beak furrowed, and tosses the Wide One over the hard side. The wood suffers. Dusky One as Njal of the Burning sang. We 16 pumped, my lady, in 4 oar rooms, but the surge waxed. The Dusky One beat over the hull of the driven sea ship. These are other names for the sea, such as it is proper to use in periphrasing ships or gold. Ran, it is said, was Aegir's wife, even as is written here. To the sky shot up the deep's gleeds, with fearful might the sea surged. Methinks our stems the clouds cut, Ran's road to the moon soared upward. The daughters of Aegir and Ran are 9, and their names are recorded before: Himingleva, Dufa, Blodughada, Hefring, Udr, Hrun, Bilgja, Drufn, Kolga. Einar Skulason recorded the names of 6 of them in this stanza, beginning: Himingleva sternly stirreth, and fiercely the sea's wailing. Welling Wave as Valgardr sang. Foam rested in the sea's bed, swollen with wind the deep played, and the welling waves were washing the awful heads of the warships. Billow as Ottar the Swarthy sang. Ye sheer with shaven rudder billows moisty deep, the broad sheet which girls spun on the masthead with the rollers reindeer sported. Foamfleck as Ormr sang. The hawk-like heedful lady has every virtue. Lofn of the Foamfleck's flame gold, faithful as a friend, all faults renounceth. Wave-born as Thorleikr the Fair sang. The sea wails, and the wave-born bears bright froth o'er the red wood, where gapes the ruler's brown ox, with mouth gold ornamented. Shoal as Einarr sang. Nor met the forward-minded, where the fierce sea on our friends falls. I think the shoal becalmed not the ship, wood of the waters. Downward the fells of fullness fall on the Bear of Tackle. Now forward Winterling stirreth the ship on Glami's sea path. Comer as here. The comber fell headlong o'er me, the main called me home unto it. I accepted not the sea's bidding. Breaker as Ottar sang. In burst the shipsides thin, rushed the breaker downward, flushed stood the wind, bane of the wood. Men endured wild tempests then. Wave as Bragi sang. The giver of the wave's coals, who cut Thor's slender tackle, the line of the land of sea mews, loved not to fight the wroth sea. Sound as Einarr sang. I sheared the sound from Hrun southbound. My hand was gold wound when the giver I found. Fjord as Einarr sang. Next I see a serpent carved well on the splendid ale horn. Let the fjord fire's dispenser learn how for that I pay him. Wetness as Marcus sang. I'll not lampoon the chatterer, lord of the fearful sword blade, who squanders the son of wetness. Ill is he who spoileth verses. 61. What are the names of fire? Even as is written here: not seldom does the fire blaze which Magnus sets; the stalwart ruler burns habitations; houses blow reek before him. Glow, as Valgardr sang: fierce glow with red-hot embers swiftly from the soot flared; straight o'er the tottering dwellings stood up the dense smoke columns. Bale, as here: Haki was burned on Bale, where the sea's broad wake weltered. Gleeds, as Grani sang: I think the gleeds diminished, Glami's tracks, thus the king kindled. Embers, as Atli sang: with blood the axe is reddened, embers wax, burn many houses, halls stand aglow; now rages the gem, good men are falling. Here fire is called Gem also. Vapor, as here: half built by the Nid's side burn the All-Ruler's dwellings. I think fire raised the hall's pride; vapor shot rime on the people. Hot ashes, as Arnorr sang: the Isle Dane's wrathful Harmr with the Raumar spared not hard counsel; hot ashes made them calmer, the Heinir's threatening words hushed. Flames, as Einarr sang: flame soon was alight, and swiftly took flight all Hising's host; the fight they lost. Flare, as Valgardr sang: the sturdy king's bright flare soared above the castle's bulwark; the Vikings burst in grimly; grief on the maid descended. Lo, as Haldorr sang: there did ye share their jewels, while o'er the host the shields low, the sword shrieked fiercely; never wert thou spoiled of conquest. 62. These are the time names: cycle, days of yore, generation, lang syne, year, season, winter, summer, spring, autumn, month, week, day, night, morning, eve, twilight, early, soon, late, betimes, day before yesterday, yester-eve, yesterday, tomorrow, hour, moment. These are more names of night in Alsvinnsmal. Night is called among men and among the gods Mist Time; Hooded Hour, the holy powers know it; Sorrowless, the giants; and elves name it Sleep Joy; the dwarves call it Dream Weaver. It is autumn from the equinox till the time when the sun sets 3 hours and a half after noon; then winter endures till the equinox; then it is spring till the moving days; then summer till the equinox. The month next before winter is called Harvest Month; the first in winter is the month of cattle slaughter; then Freezing Month; then Rain Month; then the month of winter's wane; then Goi; then Single Month; then Cuckoo Month and Seed Time; then Egg Time and Lamb Weaning Time. Then comes Sun Month and Pasture Month; then Haying Season; then Reaping Month. 63. What are the simple terms for men? Each in himself is man. The first and highest name by which man is called is Emperor; next to that, King; the next thereto, Earl. These 3 men possess in common all the following titles: All-Ruler, as this song showeth: I know all rulers east and south o'er the ship's seat. Svein's son, in proof, is better than any other War Prince. Here he is called War Prince also; for this reason he is called All-Ruler, that he is sole ruler of all his realm. Host Arrayer, as Gizur sang: the Host Arrayer feedeth the wolf and the raven in Folk Mote; Olafr gladdens in Skogul's sharp showers of battle the geese of Odin. A king is called Host Arrayer because he divides his war host into companies. Leader, as Ottar the Swarthy sang: the leader taketh Odin's loved wife, the lordless land, his a warrior's life. Lord or Lording, as Arnorr sang: Lord of Hjaltland, highest of heroes, gained the victory in every thunderous sword clash; the bard will extol his glory. An earl is called Host Duke, and a king also is so termed, forasmuch as he leads his host to battle. Thus sang Thjodolfr: he who put to shame the Host Duke thrust out the eyes of prisoners; he who speeds the sacrifices, in song I chant his praises. Signor, or Senor, as Sigvatr sang: O Norway's gracious Signor, grant the wretched as the happy may now enjoy thy wise laws, give greatly, hold thy word. Munificent One, as Marcus sang: The munificent prince brought fire's destruction o'er the base people. To the pirates death was fated. Thief compeller, south at Yom highest flame glow kindle. Illustrious One, as Hallvardr sang: No illustrious one nearer under earth's hazel liveth than thou, O monk's upholder. The gold miniatured Danes protecteth. Land Driver, as Thjodolfr sang: The guileless land driver sprinkles Kraki's gleaming barley, as was written before. He is called so because he drives his host about the lands of other kings, or drives a host out of his own land. 64. There was a king named Halfdan the Old, who was most famous of all kings. He made a great sacrificial feast at midwinter, and sacrificed to this end, that he might live 300 years in his kingdom. But he received these answers: he should not live more than the full life of a man, but for 300 years there should be no woman and no man in his line who was not of great repute. He was a great warrior, and went on forays far and wide in the eastern regions. There he slew in single combat the king who was called Sigtryggr. Then he took in marriage that woman named Alvig the Wise, daughter of King Eymundr of Humgardr. They had 18 sons, 9 born at one birth. These were their names: the first, Thengil, who was called Manathengil; the second, Risir; the third, Gramr; the fourth, Gylfi; the fifth, Hilmir; the sixth, Jufr; the seventh, Tigi; the eighth, Skili or Skuli; the ninth, Hari or Hera. These 9 brothers became so famous in foraying that in all records since their names are used as titles of rank, even as the name of king or that of earl. They had no children, and all fell in battle. Thus sang Ottar the Swarthy: In his youth stalwart Thengil was swift and staunch in battle. I pray his line endureth, o'er all men I esteem him. Thus sang Marcus: The Risir let the Rhine's sun shimmer from the reddened Skull's ship on the sea fells. Thus sang Egill: The Gramr the hood hath lifted from the hair-fenced brows of the singer. Thus sang Eyvindr: He played with the land folk who should have defended. Gylfi the gladsome stood 'neath the gold helmet. Thus sang Glumr Geirason: Hilmir beneath the helmet reddened the sword hone-hollowed. Thus sang Ottar the Swarthy: Let Jufr hear the beginning of his laud. All the king's praises shall be maintained, and justly let him mark my praise song's measures. As Stufr sang: The glory ardent Tigi south before Niz with 2 hands beat down the band of heroes. Glad beneath their shields the host went. Thus sang Hallfredr: From Skili I am parted; this age of swords hath caused it. 'Tis greatest of all self-mockings to hope that the king's guard cometh. Thus sang Marcus: I bid the hawk-like Danish Hari hark to my cunning web of praises. Halfdan and his wife had 9 other sons also. These were Hildir, from whom the Hildings are come; Nefir, from whom the Niflungs sprang; Audi, from whom the Udlungs are come; Ingvi, from whom the Ynglings are descended; Dagr, from whom come the Duglings; Bragi, from whom the Bragnings are sprung, that is, the race of Halfdan the Munificent; Budli, from whom the Budlungs are come; from the house of the Budlungs Atli and Brynhildr descended. The 8th was Lofdi, who was a great war king; that host who were called Lofdar followed him. His kindred are called Lofdungs, whence sprang Eylimi, Sigurdr Fafnisbani's mother's sire. The 9th, Sigar, whence come the Siklings; that is, the house of Siggeir, who was son-in-law of Volsungr. and the house of Sigar, who hanged Hagbardr. From the race of Hilding sprang Haraldr the Red-bearded, mother's father of Halfdan the Swarthy. Of the Niflungs' house was Gjuki. Of the house of Udlings, Kjar. Of the house of the Ylfings was Eirikr the Wise in speech. These also are illustrious royal houses. From Yngvi the Ynglings are descended. From Skjoldr in Denmark the Skjoldungs are come. From Fulsungr in the land of Franks those who are called Fulsungs. One war king was named Skelfir, and his house is called the House of Skilfings. His kindred is in the eastern region. These houses which were named but now have been used in skaldship for titles of rank. Even as Einar sang: I learned that the Hildings sallied to hold the spear assembly on the Grey Isle. The broad shields, green lindens, burst in sunder. As Grani sang: the Dugling to eagles kindred for drink gave Danish blood. As Gamli Naivadarskald sang: not long since the young Udling with ship's deck and with sword blade joined battle, waging fiercely of points the bitter tempest. As Jorunn sang: the Bragning bade the weapons be dyed in blood of vile folk. The people endured his anger. Houses bowed before red embers. Thus sang Einar: the Budlung's blade sheared, blood on darts was smeared. The storm cloud of Hildr at Whitby spilled. Thus sang Arnor: the kin of Sicklings inureth to the waves the ship's sea-tossing. With blood he dyes the warships within, 'tis the Wheel of Ravens. As Thjodolfr sang: thus the doughty Sickling ended his life. In dire straits were we. The glorious Lofdung waited bravely surcease of living. The folk who were called Lofdar followed King Lofdi. As Arnor sang: chief, another Skjoldung higher than thou shall never be born 'neath sun's light. Volsung, as Thorkel Hamarskald sang: the kin of Volsungs gave counsel to send me the gold-decked weapon o'er the cool waters. Yngling, as Ottar the Swarthy sang: in the east no mighty Yngling to earth fell, ere o'ertook thee he who subjected to him the sea isles from the westward. Yngvi: that too is a king's title, as Markus sang: the age shall hear the praise of Eirikr. None in the world a prince hath known of lordlier. Thou holdest, Yngvi, the seat of kings with long-kept glory. Skilfing, as Valgardr sang: the Skilfing kept a great host southward in the broad lands, where the swift ships shivered. Sicily soon was desolated. Signor, as Sigvatr sang: O Norway's gracious Signor, let the poor enjoy, give greatly. 65. Skalds are called bards, and in skaldship it is correct to call any man so whom one will. Those men who served King Halfr were called champions, and from their name warriors are called champions, and it is correct to call all men so. In skaldship men are called Lofdar also, as is written above. Those men are called Skatnir, who serve the king named Skati the Munificent. From his name every one who is munificent is called Skati. They who followed Bragi the Old were called Bragnar. They who assess the transaction of men are called taxers. Fyrdar and Fyrar are they called who defend the land. Vikings and fleetmen form a ship-army. They who followed King Baimuni were called Baimar. Captains of companies are called grooms, even as he is called who carries home a bride. The Goths are named after that king who is called Goti, from whom Gotland is named. He was so called after Odin's name, derived from the name Gautr. For Gautland or Gotland was named after Odin's name, and Sweden from the name of Svidur, which is also a title of Odin's. At that time all the mainland which he possessed was called Reidgotaland, and all the islands Eygotaland, that is now called the realm of Danes or of Swedes. Young men not householders are called drengs. while they are acquiring wealth and glory. Seafaring drengs are they who voyage from land to land. Kings' drengs are they who serve rulers. They also are drengs who serve wealthy men or franklins. Valiant and ambitious men are called drengs. Warriors are also called champions and troops. These are soldiers. Freeholders are called thanes and yeomen. Those men who go about reconciling men are called daymen. These men are they who are called champions, kemps, men of war, brave men, valiant men, hardy men, overpowerers, heroes. Over against these are the following terms: soft, weak, unleavened, leavenless, melting one, sheath, coward, skulker, weakling, qualmish, caitiff, scamp, vile one, dog, lout, feeble one, paltry one, imbecile, bungler, son of wretchedness. A good man of his hands is called munificent, illustrious, towerer, mighty towerer, towering gold-giver, prince of men, wealthy one, prosperous, heaper up of riches, mighty man, chieftain. In contrast to these are they who are called niggard, miser, calculator, wretched one, wealth-hiding, gift-tardy one. A man wise in counsel is called wielder of counsel. A witless man is called clown, oaf, gander, dupe, boor, idiot, dolt, fool, madman, maniac, moonstruck. One who thinks much of dress is called gaudy, dreng, glittering one, careful of attire, tricked out. A noisy fellow is called shark-skin, braggart, sheath-cleaner, fawner, brawler, good-for-naught, worthless one. Common folk are called country folk or people. A thrall is called kept man, serf, laborer, servant. Section 66. Each one singly is called man. 'Tis twain if they are two, 3 are a thorp, 4 are a group, a band is 5 men, if there are 6 it is a squad, 7 complete a crew, 8 men make a panel, 9 are good fellows, 10 are a gang, 11 form an embassy. It is a dozen if 12 go together, 13 are a crowd, 14 are an expedition, it is a gathering when 15 meet, 16 make a garrison, 17 are a congregation, to him who meets 18 they seem enemies enough. He who has 19 men has a company, 20 men are a posse, 30 are a squadron, 40 a community, 50 are a shire, 60 are an assembly, 70 are a line, 80 are a people, 100 is a host. Section 67. Beside these there are those terms which men prefix to the names of men. We call such terms epithets of possession, or true terms, or surnames. It is an epithet of possession when one names a thing by its true name, and calls him whom one desires to paraphrase owner of that thing, or father or grandfather of that which was named. Grandsire is a third epithet. Moreover, a son is also called heir, heritor, bairn, child, and boy, inheritor. A blood kinsman is called brother, twin, germain, consanguine. A relation is also called nephew, kinsman, kin, kith, friend, kinstave, descendant, family prop, family stem, kin branch, family bough, offshoot, offspring, head tree, scion. Kinsmen by marriage are further called sibfolk, minglers of blood. A friend is called counsel-mate, counsel-giver, adviser, secret-sharer, converser, bench-fellow, fondling, seat-mate. Bench-fellow also means cabin-mate. A foe is called adversary, shooter against one, hater, attacker, scather, slayer, hard-presser, pursuer, overbearer. These terms we call epithets of possession, and so also if a man is known by his dwelling or his ship, which has a name of its own, or by his estate, when a name of its own is given to it. This we call true terms. To call a man wise man, man of thought, wise in speech, sage in counsel, wealth munificent, not slack, endower, illustrious one. These are surnames. Section 68. These are simple terms for women in skaldship. Wife and bride and matron are those women who are given to a man. Those who walk in pomp and fine array are called dame and lady. They who are witty of speech are called women of wisdom. They who are gentle are called girls. They who are of high countenance are called proud and haughty ones. She who is of noble mind is called gentlewoman. She who is richest, lady. She who is bashful, as young maids are, or those women who are modest, is called lass. The woman whose husband has departed from the land is called stay-at-home. That woman whose husband is slain is called war-widow. Widow is the term for her whose husband has died of sickness. Maid means first every woman, and then carlines that are old. Then there are those terms for women which are libellous. One may find them in songs, though they be not in writing. Those women who have one husband in common are called concubines. A son's wife is termed daughter-in-law. The husband's mother is called mother-in-law. A woman may also be called mother, grandmother, great-grandmother. A mother is called dam. Woman is further called daughter, bairn, and child. She is also called sister, lady, and maiden. Woman is also called bedfellow, speech-mate, and secret sharer of her husband, and that is an epithet of possession. 69. A man's head is termed thus should it be periphrased. Call it toil or burden of the neck, land of the helm, of the hood, and of the brain, of the hair and brows, of the scalp, of ears, eyes, and mouth, sword of Heimdallr, and it is correct to name any term for sword which one desires, and to periphrase it in terms of every one of the names of Heimdallr. The head, in simple terms, is called skull, brain, temple, crown. The eyes are termed vision or glance, and regard, swift appraising. They may be so periphrased as to call them sun or moon, shields and glass, or jewels, or stones of the eyelids, of the brows, the lashes, or the forehead. The ears are called listeners or hearing. One should periphrase them by calling them land, or any earth name, or mouth, or canal, or vision, or eyes of hearing, if the metaphors employed are new coined. The mouth one should periphrase by calling it land, or house of the tongue, or of the teeth, of words, or of the palate, of the lips, or the like, and if the metaphors used are not traditional, then men may call the mouth ship, and the lips the planks, and the tongue oar or tiller of the ship. The teeth are sometimes called gravel or rocks of words, of the mouth or of the tongue. The tongue is often called sword of speech or of the mouth. The hair which stands on the lips is called beard, mustache, or whiskers. Hair is called nap. The hair of women is called tresses. Hair is termed locks. One may periphrase hair by calling it forest, or by some tree name. One may periphrase it in terms of the skull or brain or head, and the beard in terms of chin or cheeks or throat. 70. The heart is called grain sheaf. One should periphrase it by terming it grain, or stone, or apple, or nut, or ball, or the like, in figures of the breast or of feeling. Moreover, it may be called house or earth or mount of feeling. One should periphrase the breast by calling it house or garth or ship of the heart, of breath, or of the liver, land of energy, of feeling, and of memory. Feeling is affection and emotion, love, passion, desire, love-longing. Passion should be periphrased by calling it wind of troll women. Also, it is correct to name what one soever is desired, and to name giants, periphrasing giantesses as woman or mother or daughter of the giants. Feeling is also called mood, liking, eagerness, courage, activity, memory, understanding, temper, humor, good faith. It is also wrath, enmity, mischievousness, grimness, balefulness, grief, sorrow, ill will, spite, falseness, faithlessness, fickleness, light-mindedness, baseness, hasty temper, violence. 71. The hand and forearm may be called hand, arm, paw, palm. Parts of the arm are called elbow, upper arm, wolf's joint, finger, grip, wrist, nail, fingertip, hand edge, quick. One may term the hand earth of weapons or of defensive armor, and together with shoulder and arm, the hollow of the hand and the wrist, and may be called earth of gold rings, of the falcon and the hawk, and of all the equivalents thereof. And in new coined metaphors, leg of the shoulder joint, and force of the bow. The legs may be called tree of the soles, of the insteps, of the ankles, or the like, running shaft of the road, or of the way, or the pace. One may call the leg tree or post of all these. The legs are periphrased in metaphors of snowshoes, shoes, and breeks. The parts of the legs are called thigh, knee, calf, lower leg, upper leg, instep, arch, sole, toe. One may periphrase the leg in terms of all these, calling it tree, mast, and yard thereof, and in metaphors of them all. 72. Speech is called words, language, eloquence, talk, tale, gibing, controversy, song, spell, recital, idle talk, babbling, din, chatter, squalling, merry noise, wrangling, mocking, quarrelling, wish-wash, boasting, tittle-tattle, nonsense, idiom, vanity, gabbling. It is also termed voice, sound, resonance, articulation, wailing, shriek, dash, crash, alarm, roaring, creaking, swoop, swooping, outburst. 73. Understanding is called wisdom, counsel, discernment, memory, speculation, intelligence, arithmetic, far sight, craft, word-wit, preeminence. It is called subtlety, wiliness, falsehood, fickleness. 74. Expression is of two kinds, that which is called voice and that which is called manners. Manners is also temper. Writhy also has double meaning. Writhy is the ill humour of a man, and writhy is also the rigging of a ship, or the driving gear of a horse. Far also has double meaning. Far signifies wrath, and far signifies a ship. Men have made frequent use of such ambiguous expressions as these, and this practice is called punning. Lith is that part of a man where bones meet. Lith is a word for ship. Lith means people. When a man renders another assistance, his aid is lith. Lith signifies ale. Hlith signifies the gate in a garth. Hlither men call an ox, and hlith signifies a slope. One may make such use of these distinct meanings in skaldship as to make a pun that is hard to interpret, provided one employ other distinctions than those which are indicated by the half-lines which precede. These cases are there, and many others, in which diverse things have the same name in common. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine.